Chapter 4688. The inside of the cave residence was very big. Although it was called a cave residence, it was more like a small palace. Moreover, there were several smaller caves, each separated by a certain distance. The walls of the cave residence were illuminated by luminous pearls. There was also fresh air flowing in the cave residence. Obviously, there were other exits. What are you waiting for? Come here. Emperor Qing gestured for the two younger ones to come forward. Mu Chen and Mu Yu walked forward and stopped in front of him. They looked at him, not knowing how he was going to help them break the blood curse. Emperor Qing glanced at the two standing in front of him and reached out to feel their pulse. After checking for a while, he stood up and walked to one of the caves. He said to the two of them, "You two, come with me." Seeing this, Mu Chen and Mu Yu hurriedly followed. Hao Er wanted to follow in to take a look but was stopped. There are some books in the first cave on the left. Go in and take a look. You don't have to follow. You can't go in, and you can't help even if you come in. Emperor Qing said without looking back. Hao Er stopped and stood there watching them enter the cave. Although he was worried, it was just as their master had said. He wouldn't be of much help even if he went in. Therefore, he paused for a moment and walked towards the first cave on the left. Pushing open the stone door, it opened with a creak. After he walked in, the stone door closed. At that moment it was as if the sound outside was isolated. He looked around and saw that there was a soundproof barrier set up inside. Thus, he gathered his thoughts and walked towards the bookshelves. There were 10 rows of bookshelves filled with books. He went forward to take a look and picked up a book on the mental cultivation method shelf. He opened it and couldn't help but be surprised. This was a top-notch mental cultivation method book. It was divided into the 5 elements. He flipped through it and put it back. Then he walked to the back and picked up another book to read. This was a sword technique book. When he opened the book, some of the sword technique pictures shocked him. He felt that it was extremely exquisite and for a moment, he couldn't help but be immersed in it. While he was reading the manual, he accidentally lost track of time. While he was engrossed in it, his hands began to move uncontrollably. After an unknown amount of time, the stone door was pushed open and his master was standing outside. Only then did he regain his senses. He hurriedly put the sword back and hurried forward. Slightly worried, he asked, "Shizhuan, how are the two of them?" He looked behind him, but didn't see Mu Chen and Mu Yu. The blood curse has been broken, but they have fainted from the pain and are now sleeping in the cubicle. Emperor Qing said with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was paler than before, as if he had consumed a lot of spiritual energy to help them break the blood curse. The exhaustion between his eyebrows could not be concealed. "Master, how are you? Are you okay? Do you want to rest for a while? I'll get you a glass of water." Hao Er also noticed that his face was paler than before, so he quickly went to the stone table outside and poured a cup of water for him. Emperor Qing glanced at him and didn't refuse. Instead, he reached out to take the water and drank it. Then he handed the empty cup to him and said, "You don't have to worry about the two of them. The blood curse has been broken. Let them sleep and they will be awake tomorrow. Go and see them. But don't wake them up. I also need to rest." Chapter 4689. Seeing this, Hao hurriedly went to the previous stone room to take a look. As soon as he entered, he saw Mu Chen and Mu Yu lying side by side on the stone bed. Their clothes were soaked with sweat and tightly stuck to their bodies. They seemed to be enduring severe pain. Their lips were slightly bitten by them, and their hair was also soaked with sweat and stuck together. The sweat on their forehead was also not yet dry. He didn't dare to wake them up, so he quietly looked after them for a while. He took out a handkerchief to help them wipe the sweat on their body, and secretly used his spiritual power to help them dry their clothes. Only then did he accompany them. They slept until the next morning before waking up. Mu Chen woke up first and saw his elder brother lying on the bed sleeping. Just as he was about to get out of bed, Yu also woke up. How did elder brother fall asleep here? Yu rubbed her eyes and asked while yawning. She had just woken up and her little face was still confused, as if she still didn't remember what happened yesterday. You're awake. Hao also woke up at this time. Looking at them, he quickly asked, how do you feel? Are you feeling better? Qilin. Mu Chen suddenly called, and with a flash of light, Qilin Beast appeared in front of them. Brothers Qilin came out, then can I also call out my little spirit fox? Yu said in surprise, and quickly called out, little spirit fox, quickly come out. As soon as she finished speaking, the nine-tailed spirit fox appeared with a whoosh. It landed on the bed and looked around. It stretched and said, Master, the blood curse on your body has been removed. That thing has been pressing down on us. We can't get out. Great. The blood curse is really removed. Yu happily clapped her hands and quickly got out of bed, saying, Today Master will take us down the mountain to buy things, right? Let's go find Master now. After Master helped you to remove the blood curse yesterday, I saw his complexion was somewhat pale. I don't know if he is better today. Hao said, but he didn't stop you from walking out. Who would have thought that when they came out of the stone room, they saw their master sitting at the stone table, drinking tea and reading a book. Master! 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 Yu quickly stepped forward, and with a happy face, she walked in front of him. Hao and Mu Chen, on the other hand, stood a little further away. They bowed respectfully and called out to him before standing aside. Emperor Qin glanced at the nine-tailed fox and the Qilin beast and said to them, Take your contracted beasts back. Don't let them appear in front of others unless it is absolutely necessary. Seeing this, the two of them hurriedly recalled their contracted beasts back into the space. Master, are we going down the mountain now? Can we go down the mountain to eat something? Yu asked with a smile. The Azure Supreme the Arch glanced at them and stretched out his hand to brush the three of them. The three of them felt a cool breeze blow past them. It was as if something had been taken away from their bodies, and they instantly felt refreshed. This wasn't the horsetail whisk technique. Master, what is this technique? Yu curiously asked. This is similar to the horsetail whisk technique. The difference is that the horsetail whisk technique only removes the dust and dirt on your clothes, but the cleansing technique makes you feel as if you have just taken a bath and changed your clothes. It can save you the trouble of taking a bath and changing your clothes, Emperor Qin said unhurriedly. Chapter 4690. Emperor Qin glanced at her and said, although the technique is good, it's not like you don't bathe. This technique can be used occasionally when it's inconvenient to bathe outside. When the conditions are right, it's better to bathe and change clothes. As he spoke, he stood up and said, Our Cloud Sky Mountain has a total of 2 hot springs. In the future, you can go to the small one to bathe. The spring water of the spiritual pond can strengthen your muscles and bones, making your cultivation twice the result with half the effort. We know about that spiritual pond. We've seen it before. There are 2, one big and one small. However, it seems that there's a formation barrier there. Yu said. Alright, go back and wash up. Wait for me at the entrance of the mountain. He signaled them to go back and wash up first. Yes. The 3 of them answered and left together. They thought that it would take a lot of time to travel from Cloud Sky Mountain to the nearest town. Who would have thought that they would arrive at the city gate in the middle of the morning? However, when the 3 children glanced at their master, they only felt that their master's face had changed a little after they went down the mountain. Moreover, he was by their side, but they easily forgot that he was there. What was even stranger was that they found that after seeing their master's appearance, they would forget his appearance in the blink of an eye. They couldn't remember his appearance no matter how they thought about it. Moreover, it was the same for the three of them. They looked at each other and couldn't remember their own appearance. It was as if there was a layer of gauze covering their faces and they couldn't see clearly. "Master, did you use some kind of technique?" Hao couldn't help but ask. Emperor Qin walked with his hands behind his back and said, "That's right. People with ordinary cultivation won't be able to remember your appearance even if they see it. This way, it's a bit safer for you." He paused and glanced at them, saying, "Sometimes, being ordinary is a blessing." Hearing this, the three of them didn't say anything. Knowing that it was their master's doing, they were relieved. "I'll go to the tea house in front for a while. Whatever you want to eat or buy, you can eat or buy by yourself. When you're done, you can go there to find me." He pointed at the tea house not far away. From the beginning, he didn't plan to follow the three children around the city. "All right." The three of them answered. When they were about to leave, they heard their master's voice again. "Wait. Is there anything else, master? Do you want us to buy something for you to eat? You can rest assured, I will buy it back." Yu said with a beaming smile. Hearing this, Emperor Qin smiled. He extended his hand from behind his back and placed a cosmos sack in Hao's hand. "Take it. Buy whatever you want. Don't be thrifty." He paused and said to Hao, "Yun Chen, you're the elder brother. Watch over them more." "Yes, disciple understands. Many thanks, master." Hao expressed his thanks, and after saluting him, he left with Yu and Mu Chen. Big brother, let's go eat first. I want to eat scallion pancakes, also want to eat meat buns, also want to eat sugar water." Yu muttered while walking, her voice was filled with joy and expectation. "All right, let's go eat first." Hao smiled and led the two of them to a small stall. Chapter 4691. In the grocery store. "I want 100 jin of spirit rice." Yu shouted to the shopkeeper. She touched the spirit rice with her eyes shining. After eating, they began to buy things. There were already a lot of things piled up in the space. After searching several stores with great difficulty, they finally found spirit rice in this store. They asked for 100 jin of spirit rice. When the shopkeeper heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed, 100 jin of spirit rice? Whose child are you? Do you know what spirit rice is used for? Do you know how much spirit rice costs for 1 jin? You actually asked for 100 jin. All right, let's go play somewhere else. This is not a place where you children can come to play. The things in this store are very expensive. The shopkeeper shook his head and didn't bicker with the children. He just let them leave. How much is 1 jin of spirit rice? Hao asked. When he opened his mouth, the shopkeeper seemed to have just noticed that there was a half-grown child. He looked at him and said with a smile, "Spirit rice is not calculated by money. It is calculated by crystal stones. 1 jin of spirit rice costs 30 crystal stones. Spirit rice can help one's cultivation, but not everyone can afford it. Generally, one person can only eat a handful. You see, it's like this." The shopkeeper smiled and grabbed a handful of spirit rice. He spread it on his palm and said with a smile, "You can cook a bowl of spirit rice here. You don't need to eat anything else. After eating a bowl of spirit rice, you won't feel hungry for the whole day. Instead, you will be full of energy." The three children naturally knew what he was talking about, because their mother used to give them spirit rice to eat. "Is it cheaper to buy 100 jin?" Hao asked. Hearing this, the shopkeeper was stunned for a moment. He looked at Hao in surprise. "You really want 100 jin? When he looked carefully, he found that the appearance of the three children was not very clear. It seemed that he could see that what he saw was ordinary facial features. However, he had been a shopkeeper in this city for many years. He also knew that some strong disciples had some techniques to hide their identity. Thinking of this, he looked at the three children again and had an idea in his heart. I don't have much spirit rice in this store. There are only 70 to 80 jin left. The next batch of spirit rice will be delivered in a few days. If you want all of it, I can give you a discount. The shopkeeper said. Do you have seeds here? Yu-er asked. There are seeds. No matter what kind of seeds there are. The shopkeeper smiled and said, in the entire city, only I have the most complete collection. Whether you want fruit tree seeds, spirit rice seeds, spirit flower seeds, medicinal herbs, or spirit wine, I have it all here. However, I don't buy things with gold coins, but with crystal stones. We have crystal stones, you can rest assured. I want some seeds of spiritual rice, and also some seeds of medicinal herbs. You can look at this list again, if you have, then help us prepare everything. Yu-er took out the list she had written long ago and handed it over to him. When the shopkeeper saw the crooked handwriting, he couldn't help but smile. He looked down and nodded, we have everything, but those pots and such are useless. But those are easy to find. Come with me. I'll show you the goods. If you think they're suitable, I'll get someone to pick them out and settle the bill. All right. The three of them replied and followed the shopkeeper inside. Ah. Chapter 4692. Little Sister. Hao-er and Mu-chen were startled and quickly came to her side to help her up. Seeing the wine splashed all over her body and the blood seeping out of the back of her hand from the broken wine jar, the two men's faces immediately darkened. Yu-er was knocked down, and the spirit wine spilled all over her body. Not only was the wound on the back of her hand painful, even her elbow was also somewhat bruised. She hissed, wrinkling her little face. She stood up with the support of her two elder brothers. Before the three of them could speak, the person who knocked her down actually scolded first. Where did this little girl come from? Why don't you have eyes? The one who spoke was a 30-something-year-old man. He was wearing black clothes, and his hands were holding a spirit wine jug of approximately 10 pounds. Because he had turned around with his back facing Yu-er, and because Yu-er was also small, he didn't see her from behind, and also didn't pay attention to her. However, he didn't apologize, instead he blamed her. Aya, why did you break my spirit wine? This was a top-notch wine. This. When the manager heard the sound, he turned around and saw the spirit wine spilled all over the floor, as well as the broken wine jugs. He couldn't help but look at the three children, and then at the green-robed man. This wine was broken by you, so you have to pay for it. The shopkeeper looked at them and said, each person pays half. This is also fair. Hee, shopkeeper, this wine was broken by this little girl. It has nothing to do with me. You want me to pay for it? That won't do. The blue-robed man said with a fake smile and was about to walk past the three children to pay the bill. Who knew that when he walked past the three children, Hao-er glanced at him and suddenly stretched out his leg. Ah! The blue-robed man exclaimed. Because he was holding the wine jar in his hand, he tripped and was about to fall to the ground. He hurriedly tried to stabilize his body and turn around. Who knew that he would be knocked to the ground from behind? The wine jar in his hand also smashed with a bang. The spirit wine spilled on the ground and the broken wine jar scattered all over the ground. That person couldn't dodge in time and his whole body fell down, pressing on the wine jar fragments. For a moment, only a blood-curdling scream was heard. Hiss. Ah! He was lying on the ground and couldn't get up for a long time. Only the sound of gasping could be heard. Looking at this scene, the shopkeeper's eyelids jumped. He calmly looked at the three children and suppressed the shock in his heart. He slightly moved back a step and didn't speak. Hao Er and Mu Chen glanced at the blue-robed man who fell on the ground and didn't pay attention to him. Instead, they focused their attention on their little sister. "Little sister, let me help you dry your clothes." As Hao Er spoke, he placed his hand on her clothes and operated the spirit power in his palm. Along with the surge of spirit power, the spirit wine on Yu Er's body was completely evaporated. Merely, although her clothes were dry, there was still a faint spirit wine fragrance on her body. Chapter 46-93. As he stood up, he picked up a shard from the ground and threw it at them. His speed was so fast that ordinary people would not be able to react in time. When the shopkeeper saw the green-clothed man's actions, he couldn't help but be shocked. He couldn't help but take a step forward. Just as he was about to step forward to stop him, he saw the older boy pull his younger brother and sister out of the grocery store, avoiding the attack. "Damn brat! I think you're courting death." The green-robed man chased after them angrily and swung his fist at Hao Er. "Stand aside." Hao Er pushed his younger brother and sister to the side and went forward himself. As the spiritual power in his body surged, his peak golden core cultivation strength also burst forth. Hiss! Such a young child is actually a peak golden core cultivator. Looks like this child is a noble family or a disciple of a large sect. That man is wearing the green robes of the Sky Sun Sect's inner sect disciples, right? He looks like a Sky Sun Sect's inner sect disciple. Why is he fighting with a child? This child is also bold. He dares to fight with a Sky Sun Sect's inner sect disciple. He's not simple. In my opinion, this child may be a direct disciple of a large sect. Look, he's already at the peak of the Golden Core realm at such a young age. Also, he should have a spell on him. I can't see his face clearly. If a Sky Sun Sect's inner sect disciple encounters him, I wonder who will take care of who. An old man standing in the crowd said as he stroked his beard. He watched the fight between the two with great interest. The more he watched, the more he felt that the child's strength was steady despite his young age. Moreover, his movements were strange. He was more and more certain that his origin was not simple. His gaze turned and fell on the two children at the side. The two children were also under a spell. However, with his strength, he could not see through it. That was interesting. The old man withdrew his gaze and looked at the two people fighting. Seeing that the green-robed man could not gain the upper hand empty-handed, he took out a sharp sword. As soon as he took out his sword, a cold light flashed in the little boy's hand and a sharp sword appeared. "Good sword!" the old man exclaimed in a low voice. His eyes lit up as he looked at the sharp sword in the little boy's hand. The sword exuded a cold aura, and the sword energy was sharp and intimidating. It was obvious that it was a rare treasure sword. Especially when the boy held the sword in his hand, the aura around him changed and became extremely sharp. He turned the sword in his hand and a sword flower shot out. His figure also shot out and attacked the green-robed man at a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover. Perhaps he did not expect that a little child's swordsmanship would be above his. Originally, he thought that he, who was also at the peak of Jindan's stage, would be able to suppress this little brat, even if he was suppressed after showing his sword. He couldn't help but take a few steps back while blocking the sharp sword in front of him. When the two swords collided, the biting cold sword chi burst out and went straight for his eyes. Ah! The tip of the sword slashed across his hand, causing his hand to tremble in pain. The sword in his hand also fell to the ground with a clang. His entire body was forced to sit on the ground by the sharp sword that was approaching between his eyebrows. Don't kill me. I'm a disciple of the Sky Sun sect. If you kill me, you'll become an enemy of the Heavenly Sun sect. He cried out in alarm, immediately using the name of his sect in an attempt to scare him away. Chapter 46-94. Cold sweat seeped out of the green-robed man's forehead. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly, afraid that the tip of the sword against his neck would hurt his throat. He swallowed his saliva and asked stiffly, "What do you want?" "Compensate the shopkeeper for the broken items and then get out of my sight." "How?" said coldly. "Okay." He gritted his teeth, took out his cosmos sack, and threw it to the shopkeeper. "Is this enough?" The shopkeeper hurriedly caught it and opened it. He took out the shattered spirit wine crystals and returned the remaining ones to him. "Hee, it's enough. There's more." Seeing this, Hao put away his sword and held it behind his back. He shouted, "Get out." The young man picked up the sword and held his cut wrist. He glared fiercely at Hao before gritting his teeth and leaving quickly. Good. Good. Amazing. Are all the children these days so amazing? When the surrounding people saw this, they all cheered out loud. Some of them stared at Hao with burning eyes and asked loudly, "Young master, which sect do you belong to? Your swordsmanship is so outstanding at such a young age. It seems that your master must be a powerful figure too." "Yes, young master." "Who is your master? Does your master still accept disciples?" Another person asked. They thought that if their children could learn half of this child's skills, they wouldn't have to worry about the future. However, Hao didn't pay attention to them. Instead, he walked towards his younger brother and sister and brought them to the shopkeeper. "Shopkeeper, prepare everything for us." Okay. The shopkeeper said with a face full of smiles. He looked deeply at Hao and said with a smile, "Young master, I'll give you a discount. In the future, if you want to buy things, come to me. I'll give you a discount." One look and they could tell that he wasn't a simple person. He would be even more extraordinary when he grew up. If they had a long-term relationship, it would only be beneficial to them. At that moment, he personally led them in and prepared the items on their list. After showing them once, he paid the bill. After sending them out, the shopkeeper lowered his voice and warned them, "Young lord, you'd better hurry back to your master or your clansman. That disciple from the Heavenly Sun sect won't let this matter go. He must have gone to find someone. Since you've bought your things, you should hurry back. Go back quickly so you don't run into trouble again." "Okay, we understand. Thank you." Hao thanked him and left with Mu Chen and Mu Yu. They didn't go directly to the tea house because they still had some things to buy. Thus, they went to another street to buy them. Not long after they left, the green-robed man from the sect arrived with a few other men. "Where are they?" The leader of the group, a man in a blue robe, asked. He glanced around with a malicious look on his face. "Senior brother, the 3 brats just now are here. Let me go in and ask the shopkeeper." As the man in blue spoke, he quickly walked into the shop. At this time, his injured wrist had been bandaged, but his hand was hanging limply. The injury had damaged the tendons on his wrist. If it weren't for the fact that their sect had a highly skilled doctor, his hand would have been crippled. Thinking of this, he gritted his teeth and hatred surged in his heart. Chapter 46-95. Hee, so it's this young master. The shopkeeper smiled and cupped his hands in salute. He glanced at his bandaged wrist and said with a smile, "Those 3 children have already left after buying the things. They are no longer in our shop." "Left? Where did they go?" the man in green asked. "I don't know." He shook his head. "You just took my crystal stones. Take them out and give them back to me." The man in green stepped forward and shouted, grabbing the shopkeeper's collar with one hand. Thinking of the crystal stones taken by the shopkeeper, he felt a burst of pain in his heart. "Hee, young master, you must be joking. Those crystal stones are compensation for the broken spirit wine in our store. How can I take them back to you? The shopkeeper smiled and reached out to take the man's hand off his collar. He patted it gently and smoothed out his wrinkled collar. Seeing the shopkeeper easily take his hand away, the green-robed man was startled for a moment and his mind wandered for a moment. Well, since it's compensation, don't mention anything about taking it back. The man in blue glanced at the man in green, then looked at the shopkeeper and asked, "Shopkeeper, did you see which direction they went?" "Yes." The shopkeeper nodded and smiled. He walked outside and pointed in the opposite direction. "I saw them go that way." "Thank you." The man in blue said, glancing at the few people and said, "Let's go." The man in green reluctantly followed out. After walking for a while, he asked, "Senior brother, why didn't you take back the crystal stones?" "Obviously." Before he finished, he was interrupted. "Take it back." "Ha!" The man in blue sneered and glanced at him. "Which shop in this city doesn't have a backer?" "The shopkeeper of that grocery store has a restrained aura. At first glance, you can tell that he is a master. Maybe his strength is above us. You want to take back the crystal stones from him? You are really naive. Are we just going to let it go?" The man in green was a little unwilling. "Find those 3 brats. Why can't we take it back?" The man in blue said and snorted, "What's more, a 10-year-old brat can reach the peak of the gold core stage. I also want to meet him and see what his background is." Because the shopkeeper had pointed in the opposite direction of the 3 children, their original intention was to find the 3 children, but unexpectedly, the more they walked, the further they went from the 3 children. At this time, after the 3 children had bought all the things, when they passed by the dessert shop, licked her lips like a little gluttonous cat, and looking at that shop with shining eyes, she said to her 2 brothers beside her, big brother, let's go in and buy some desserts, okay?" Hao and Mu Chen saw her greedy look and couldn't help but smile dotingly. "Okay, let's go in and buy some to bring back." Okay, then I will pick some more and keep them to eat slowly." Beamed with smiles, then holding their hands, she happily walked inside. Emperor Qin was drinking tea in the tea house while waiting for the 3 kids. He was looking at an 8-trigram mirror in his hand, which showed what the 3 kids had encountered outside. When he saw the 3 of them holding hands and entering a dessert shop, the corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint arc. Chapter 4696. At this moment, the green-robed man was walking beside the blue-robed man and said, "Senior brother, could it be that the shopkeeper didn't tell us the truth? We haven't found any traces of the 3 children on our way here. Then let's keep looking. It's just a few children. As long as they're still in the city, we'll definitely find them." The blue-robed man's voice deepened as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. "Anyone who dares to touch a member of our Sky Sun sect is going against our sect. How can we allow them to be so presumptuous? Senior brother is right. Those 3 brats are so arrogant. If we find them, they'll definitely..." "Ah!" Before he could finish speaking, he screamed and fell to the ground. "Junior brother." The man in blue was shocked. He turned around and when he saw the person who had already stopped breathing on the ground, his face could not help but turn pale. There was even a trace of fear in his eyes. He instinctively raised his head and looked around. The few disciples who were following him quickly surrounded him and pointed their swords at him. They looked around vigilantly, trying to find out who had done it. However, when they looked around, they only saw that the people on the street and even in the shops and restaurants on both sides of the street were looking in their direction. Their faces were filled with shock and astonishment. Obviously, no one had expected that one of them would suddenly be killed while they were walking and chatting. Furthermore, the killer didn't even show his face. "Senior brother, how is he?" One of the disciples asked with a trace of panic in his voice. Dead. The blue-robed man swallowed his saliva and suppressed the shock and fear in his heart. He looked at the tiny wound between the green-robed man's eyebrows. There wasn't even any blood seeping out from the wound, but the person had already stopped breathing. When they heard that the person had died, the disciples were stunned. They turned around and saw a tiny wound between the man's eyebrows. However, they didn't even know what weapon had killed him. "Carry him back, let's go," the blue-robed man said, and asked them to carry the person back to the sect. They had come out to buy things together. Now that one of them had died, it would be difficult for them to explain themselves when they returned. However, his sudden death terrified him. He guessed that it had something to do with the 3 children. Otherwise, why was he the only one who was killed? Could it be that the 3 children had an expert protecting them from behind? They knew that they were going to cause trouble for the 3 children, so they killed their junior brother to intimidate them. They didn't dare to stay any longer. They immediately carried the man and quickly left, wanting to report this matter to the sect as soon as possible. At this moment, the 3 children were still unaware of what had happened. They were walking around the city and putting the things they bought into the space. Perhaps it was because they had bought a lot of things and put them into the space. Along the way, they were being watched by some people. These brats must have a lot of valuable things on them. We've been following them all the way. Other than the 3 of them, no one else has followed them. I think we don't need to wait for Big Brother to come. How about we just lure them to the alley in front of us? A rogue cultivator said as he stared greedily at the 3 children in front of him. Let's wait for Big Brother. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain if something happened. Another itinerant cultivator said. He turned around and grinned. Look, isn't Big Brother here? Chapter 4697. Big Brother. Several people hurriedly surrounded him in a fawning manner. Big Brother, we found a few fat sheep. We were waiting for Big Brother to come so that we can slaughter them. One of the rogue cultivators spoke and pointed to the front. Big Brother, look, the 3 kids in front have bought a lot of things along the way. Their crystal stones seem to be endless. We guessed that they must have more valuable things on them. Moreover, they don't have any adults accompanying them to protect them. If we pick on them, we can definitely make a lot of money. The brocade-robed rogue cultivator had a toothpick in his mouth. He was originally thinking about something when he heard his subordinate say so. When he saw the 3 children, he couldn't help but be shocked. Big Brother, let's lure them into the alley in front. These fat sheep won't be able to escape. The person next to him didn't see the slight change in his expression. He was still staring greedily at the 3 children in front of him. If it weren't for the trouble of selling those 3 brats, I really would have put a sack over them and sold them. Sell your head. The brocade-robed rogue cultivator cursed and reached out to slap the rogue cultivator's head. If you want to die, go by yourself. Don't drag me into it. Big Brother, what's wrong? Can't we kill them? It's just 3 children. The person was slapped on the head, but he didn't dare to fight back. He just lowered his head and took a step back. When I went to eat earlier, I saw the older of the 3 children in front. His strength is at the peak of the gold core stage, and he even beat up an inner disciple of the Sky Sun sect. You dare to fight with him? Aren't you courting death? Also, when I came over just now, I heard someone on the street say that an inner disciple of the Sky Sun sect died on West Street. As he spoke, a wisp of deep thought appeared in the eyes of the independent cultivator, and he gazed at the 3 children that were gradually disappearing into the distance. He said, those 3 children are definitely disciples of some great sect or clan. Moreover, there's someone protecting them from the shadows. Isn't that courting death? Hearing this, the rogue cultivators were so scared that they broke out in a cold sweat. Their palms were cold as they patted their chests. That was close. If Big Brother hadn't come, I'm afraid they would have died here. How in front of them continued to walk with his younger brother and sister. After walking for a while, he glanced back and saw several rogue cultivators standing there looking at them and didn't follow them. Seeing this, he didn't bother and took them to buy things again. When it was close to noon, the three of them arrived at the tea house and found their master by the window on the second floor. "Master, we're back." Yu happily trotted over, and with smiling eyes, she said, "I also bought something to eat for master." "Master, quickly try it, this mung bean cake is very delicious." She took out a pastry from her space, opened it, and placed it in front of him. The Qing emperor glanced at the three of them and asked, "Have you bought everything?" His eyes seemed to fall on the little girl's bandaged hand. "Yes, we've bought everything," Hao and Mu Chen answered at the same time. "Why does little Qi have the smell of wine? Did something happen?" he asked unhurriedly as he picked up a piece of cake to eat. Chapter 4698. Master, Master, it has nothing to do with Big Brother. Big Brother protected us. Yu was worried that he would blame her big brother, so she quickly spoke up. Emperor Qin glanced at her and said, "Didn't I tell you before? Don't expose your relationship outside. In the future, don't call me big brother, just call me eldest senior brother and second senior brother." "Oh." Yu responded and secretly glanced at the two of them. "Do you remember?" Emperor Qin looked at the two of them and asked. The two of them looked at each other and then said, "Yes, this disciple remembers." As senior brothers, if you meet someone who bullies your little junior sister in the future, no matter what the other party's background is, teach them a lesson first. If the other party has the intention to kill you, then kill him before he kills you. Do you remember? His voice was faint, revealing a cold and breathtaking air, making Hao and Mu Chen's hearts tremble. "Yes, this disciple remembers. Since you bought the things, then let's go." He stood up, left a gold coin, brushed his robe, and walked out with his hands behind his back. Seeing this, Yu quickly put the pastry on the table that he had only eaten a piece of into her space. Then she quickly followed her two brothers to catch up with their master's footsteps and went to Cloud Sky Mountain. On the other side, the venerables of Sky Sun sect looked at the dead disciple with a dignified expression. It should be a drop of water that killed him, not some hidden weapon. One of the venerables said while stroking his beard, "And to be able to control water to kill people from a distance, this person's cultivation is probably unfathomable." Hearing this, another person looked at the blue-clothed disciple and asked in a calm voice with a face full of anger, "Didn't you go down the mountain to buy things? How did you become enemies with others? And caused such a big matter? Master, please forgive us. At that time, only junior brother went to buy spiritual wine. The rest of us went to buy other things." This disciple also didn't expect that he would have a conflict with the three children, and was even killed. The blue-clothed disciple knelt down and lowered his head, waiting for his master to punish him. "Go to the law courtyard to receive 30 lashes." The venerables shouted in a deep voice. Looking at him, he frowned and said, "Still not leaving?" "Yes, this disciple will go receive his punishment now." He quickly got up and quickly walked out. After he left, the venerables looked at the corpse lying on the ground. One of them then asked, "Who do you think killed him?" "No matter who killed him. With. Otherwise, in the future, everyone will think that our Sky Sun sect, too." When the person beside him heard this, he pondered for a moment before replying with some hesitation, "That's true, but I'm worried that he might be some hidden almighty. If that's the case, even our Sky Sun sect won't be able to do anything to him. Moreover, if the other party is some hidden almighty, our Sky Sun sect's disciples will be offended if we attack his disciples. If he kills them, then so be it. No one will dare to say anything." Chapter 4699. The one who died was his disciple. They didn't want to stand up for him, so they made all sorts of excuses. However, as their master, if he didn't deal with this matter, what dignity would he have in the future? What's more, which of those who could enter their sect wasn't a descendant of an aristocratic family? He also had to give an explanation to the family of that disciple who died. On the other side, Qing Di, who had returned to Cloud Sky Mountain, didn't care about the 3 children. Instead, he returned to his cave residence. On the other hand, the 3 children arranged everything they needed to use in the small kitchen, drew some talismans, and made some puppets to help them. They were completely unaware that because of the trouble they caused outside, their master had even killed the disciple of that sect, causing the people of that sect to go everywhere to inquire about them. Unfortunately, it was the 3 children's first time entering the city. Moreover, they used a spell to cover their faces. Even if the people of the Sky Sun sect wanted to investigate, they couldn't find anything. The days passed peacefully. The 3 children followed Qing Di and learned. Qing Di taught them according to their aptitude. He didn't teach them the same thing, nor did he teach them the same set of sword techniques. He picked a set of sword techniques for each of them and guided them in their cultivation. He also let them use the sword techniques they learned to compare notes. Compared to Hao, and Mu Chen who liked to practice the sword, Yu was more interested in studying medicine, perhaps because of her mother's influence. After the puppets plowed the spiritual soil, she personally planted the spiritual herbs and sowed them. She studied according to the books, and if she didn't understand, she would run to her master. Qing Di saw that her swordsmanship wasn't as good as her 2 elder brothers, and she liked to study medicine. Thus, on this day, he went to the medicinal field and watched the little figure busying herself under the scorching sun. She was obviously a little girl, but she was quite good at work. Seeing her carrying water to water the plants, he called out, "Little Qi, come here." Hearing the voice, she turned around. When she saw her master, she put down the things in her hands and walked over with a smile. "Master, why are you here? If I don't come, you plan to water the spiritual herbs like this?" He shook his head with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. "You're a cultivator, so you need to know how to use a cultivator's spirit energy when doing these things. Whether it's watering flowers or trees, you only need to use a watering technique to nourish these spiritual herbs." As he spoke, his hand slowly formed a seal. Not far away, the water in the bucket surged. As he formed the seal, the water fell like rain onto the Ling fields. "Did you see that? That's it." He looked at Xiao Budian beside him and saw that her eyes were wide open and filled with surprise. He could not help but feel that it was funny. "Master, why didn't you teach me this spell earlier? I've been watering it for days." After being surprised, she smiled and pulled his sleeve. Master, teach me again. I haven't learned it yet." Emperor Qin turned around and walked away, saying, "Come with me." He walked slowly and brought her to a waterfall at the back of the mountain. "You can practice here. Also, Master has a set of movement techniques that you need to learn." He handed a book to her and warned, "You must study diligently until you can walk on water without the slightest trace of water on your boots. Only then can you learn other things." Chapter 4700. The Azure Emperor taught her once and then let her learn from the books. He then went to see how his other 2 disciples were doing. There was no sense of time in the mountains, especially when it came to cultivation. It seemed to pass very quickly. The 3 children immersed themselves in cultivation and gradually got used to the life and days here. 1 year later, in the morning. Boom! In the heaven and earth controlled by Xianyuan Mo's, a bolt of lightning boomed. It reached the 9 heavens and spread in the sky, causing the surroundings to tremble. What's going on? What happened? In another heaven realm, a few sovereigns were having a meeting. Suddenly, they heard the rumbling of thunder. They couldn't help but stand up and walk out. "Let me take a look," one of the sovereigns said. He closed his eyes and released his divine sense to investigate. After a while, he opened his eyes. His expression changed slightly, and he said, "It's the ghost doctor who made the commotion. It should be some heaven-defying pill. This is pill lightning." As soon as his voice fell, another bolt of heavenly thunder rang out, and it was still transmitted into their ears. "It's the ghost doctor Fengjiu." They were stunned. They looked at each other and listened to the voice echoing in the sky. One of them said, "Hasn't the ghost doctor been quiet for a few days? I heard she was in seclusion. Why is she refining pills?" The Azure Dragon sovereign Xianyuan Mose failed to break through that day. His soul seemed to have been struck by lightning and disappeared. Now, there's only a faint trace of spiritual energy left in the heaven and earth that he controls. A year has passed and there's still no change. I'm afraid he's really doomed. Compared to whether he's really doomed, I'm more interested to know what kind of pill the ghost doctor refined this time. How did it attract such lightning? One of the sovereigns said. His eyes flashed. He said, "She's already a supreme. If she breaks through and becomes an immortal, she'll really live as long as the heaven and earth. After she ascends, she'll become a powerful cultivator in the immortal world. She'll be the great emperor in charge of the heavens and earth. She'll be the supreme of the world." When he spoke up to this point, the monarch's eyes flickered slightly, and a wisp of dim light flashed through them. He said, "Do all of you remember what we said about the star of the phoenix?" They were stunned. They looked at each other. One of them said, "We remember, but we don't know what the heaven's limit means. Also, if she ascends and becomes an immortal, she'll live as long as the heaven and earth. But aren't there powerful cultivators up there too? If she really goes up there, does she really belong? In a place where those almighty beings of the upper immortal realm exist, how could he surpass them and become the supreme being of the world?" "Huh, you don't know." Another person laughed. In fact. But they only knew a little about the immortal world. Most of the people in the immortal world were from clans that had been around for thousands of years. There weren't many who could really become powerful cultivators. Sovereigns like them could control a part of the world and become sovereigns. They were like emperors in the mortal world. Chapter 47:01. However, if they were to ascend to the immortal realm and did not have a powerful family behind them, they would have no choice but to become a consecrated member of a large sect or rely on an almighty to become their subordinate. If they did not have a powerful backing, they might even be killed in the immortal realm if they were not careful. This was also the reason why they did not dare to attempt ascension even though they yearned to live as long as the heavens and earth. Those people in the immortal realm were born there and had a higher starting point than them. They did not have to be powerful, but as long as their family was powerful enough, they could do whatever they wanted. As for sovereigns like them, no matter how powerful they were, if they did not have the power to contend against a 1,000-year-old family, they could only endure when they encountered problems. Sigh, I do hope that the ghost doctor can really become the most powerful person in the world. That would be a good thing for us. One of the sovereigns said as he looked at the sky with his hands behind his back and sighed. Since there were people above who did not want Fengjiu to ascend, then her ascension would be extremely dangerous. If she was not careful, she might end up like Xianyuan Mose. Just as they were talking, the third bolt of lightning sounded. Then, everything returned to normal. Based on the ghost doctor's vengeful personality, those people above had better pray that she does not ascend. Otherwise, if she ascends, she will definitely cause chaos in the immortal realm. It's hard to say if those almighty people will be able to keep their positions. Another sovereign said with anticipation in his eyes. While the few of them were discussing, Fengjiu walked out of the pill refining room. Perhaps it was because she had stayed in the pill refining room for a long time, her clothes were covered in medicinal dregs and she looked a little unkempt. However, her eyes were very clear and the light in her eyes was even more breathtaking. Congratulations Master on the completion of the magical pill. Leng Hua, Du Fan and the rest were guarding outside the courtyard. When they saw her coming out, they hurriedly stepped forward to congratulate her. Their faces were filled with joy. Their master had been preparing to refine the elixir ever since he came out of seclusion 3 months ago. It took him 2 months to prepare the herbs, and just refining this cauldron of elixir alone took him an entire month. "Is there any news on the matter I asked you to investigate?" Fengjiu asked as he looked at Du Fan and the others. Replying to Master, "There are already some clues. We were just waiting for Master to come out and report. Just a few days ago, Luo Yu and Gu Mo went to confirm it. If there is any news, they will report back," Du Fan said. Hearing this, Fengjiu's expression changed slightly. He nodded and said, "Go to the study later and explain everything to me in detail." "Yes," Du Fan replied. "Master, I have already ordered the servants to prepare water for your bath. Please return to your room and take a bath," Leng Shuang said. Fengjiu responded before walking towards the main courtyard. After taking a bath, changing into a new set of clothes and eating something, Fengjiu went to the study. "Master." Seeing her, Du Fan stepped forward and bowed before following her into the study. "How did you find out?" Fengjiu asked as he sat down at the table. Chapter 4702. Du Fan explained the information he had gathered in the simplest and most direct manner. He then stood there quietly and looked at her, waiting for her decision. When Fengjiu heard his words, her heart skipped a beat. Her expression was a little dazed as she muttered, "The Eastern Sea Spirit Region. Why didn't I think of that?" As she spoke, she immediately regained her senses and stood up, saying, "I want to go there personally." Hearing this, Du Fan paused for a moment, then said, "Mistress, do you want to wait for Luo Yu and the others to send back news before leaving? After all, this is only our guess. We haven't confirmed whether the Yama Lord is there or not." Fengjiu shook her head, saying, "No matter if it is or not, I have to go there personally. Go and make the arrangements. We will leave in a moment. Let Leng Hua and Leng Shuang follow us. Let the others take care of their own matters." "Yes." Du Fan responded and didn't stop him. Instead, he turned around and walked out after saluting. "Moze, is that you? If it is you, why didn't you come back? Are your injuries serious? Or is there another reason?" Fengjiu muttered, her hand gently stroking a book on the table. That was the book that he used to sit here and read. Looking at this book now, it was as if he had always been by her side and had never left. The Eastern Sea Spirit Region was a sea that stretched as far as the eye could see. Throughout the year, the sea water was so deep that one could not see the bottom. There were also very few waves in the sea. However, in the past year, cultivators had discovered that not only would there be a wave every 3 months, even the beasts in the nearby forests would come to the shore to kneel and howl. This strange phenomenon caused some cultivators to speculate. Could some heavenly treasure have been born in the sea? Or perhaps some divine beast had been born? Or some strange treasure had been born? Quite a few people were tempted. In the past few months, they would avoid the day when all the beasts would kneel down in worship. Instead, they would come to the sea in an attempt to salvage and see if there were any treasures at the bottom of the sea. However, the spirit domain sea was bottomless, and the bottom of the sea was extremely dangerous. Even if there were people with good strength, they would not dare to go down to the sea to search for treasures. Especially when there were people who risked their lives to go down to the sea in boats, but were swept into the depths of the sea and died without a corpse. More people only dared to watch and did not dare to take the risk. Luo Yu and Guemo traveled for half a month before arriving at the Spirit East Sea. When they arrived at the seaside and saw the groups of cultivators and mercenaries, they couldn't help but look at each other. "I heard that this sea region is extremely dangerous. I didn't expect that there would be so many people who aren't afraid of death coming to join in the fun." Luo Yu raised his eyebrows and smiled. He used his elbow to nudge Gumo beside him and said, "Tell me, how should we go down? Didn't you bring the water-repelling pearl? Let's go down that way. There are fewer people there. It won't cause a commotion." As Gumo spoke, he indicated for him to look to the other side. Luo Yu looked in the direction he indicated. He saw that there were rocks half covering the seaside and there were fewer people. If they wanted to go down to the sea, it was indeed the best way. Chapter 4703. Gumo nodded. He glanced around and said, "Let's go rest over there." Thus, the two of them walked towards a less crowded area. When they arrived at the deserted area, the two of them set up 2 tents on the beach to rest for the night. "Are you 2 rogue cultivators? Are you also here for the treasure at the bottom of the sea?" Just as the two of them were setting up their tents, a few rogue cultivators walked over and sat down on the beach next to them to ask questions. Luo Yu finished setting up his tent and saw a few rogue cultivators sitting next to him. Moreover, they seemed to be preparing to rest next to him. He couldn't help but frown. He said, "This place is huge. Stay away from us. Don't disturb our rest." They originally wanted to go down to the sea tomorrow when there was no one around, so they picked the most remote place on the beach so that they wouldn't be disturbed or noticed. Who would have thought that there would be a few rogue cultivators here? Hee, I didn't expect you to have such a bad temper. The rogue cultivators saw that the two of them didn't answer their questions and even thought that they were an eyesore. Their expressions instantly turned cold. They couldn't be blamed for not being observant. Both Luo Yu and Gumo were concealing their strength and cultivation. These rogue cultivators weren't very powerful either. Naturally, they couldn't see their true strength. On the contrary, they thought that they were rogue cultivators like them who came to search for treasures after hearing the news. They originally wanted to pull the two of them into their group but didn't expect to be brushed off. Their expressions immediately turned cold. Compared to Luo Yu, Gumo was even more direct. He couldn't be bothered to speak to these people. Instead, he released his aura. In an instant, the rogue cultivators who were standing couldn't help but kneel down under the powerful aura. Cold sweat seeped out of their foreheads and their faces instantly turned pale. Their eyes were filled with shock. "Are you going to scram or not?" Gumo asked coldly. The aura of a powerful cultivator pressed down on them like a mountain, causing them to be unable to straighten their backs. Due to the strength of the aura, the blood in their bodies also started to rush. They faintly felt the urge to rush up to their throats. "Spare our lives. We will scram immediately." The leading rogue cultivator begged for mercy under the pressure. As he spoke, he felt blood flowing out from his throat and on the tip of his tongue. Gumo didn't want to take their lives. He retracted his pressure and watched them scramble away before sitting down at the entrance of the tent. TSK, you're amazing. I'll learn from you next time." Luo Yu grinned and patted him on the shoulder. Hearing his mocking words, Gumo didn't reply. Instead, he looked at the sea and said, "Say, if the Yama Lord is really here, is he in the sea? If that's the case, He didn't say anything because he didn't know how to continue. No matter how powerful a living person was, how could he stay in the depths of the ocean and not come out? Unless there was some secret underwater palace or ancient ruins under the sea. Otherwise, how could a person block all 6 senses and stay in the sea and not come up? Chapter 4704. The two of them were silent as they sat by the tent, watching the waves crash against the sea with the wind. The next morning, when the sky had just brightened, the two of them entered the water from the side. As the water avoidance pearl in Luo Yu's palm spun, the water automatically moved to the sides, revealing a path into the sea. The two of them walked in. After they entered, the sea behind them closed up and returned to its original state. They gradually went deeper and deeper. At first, they could still see the scenery at the bottom of the sea due to the early morning light. Gradually, when they reached the depths, they could only see darkness around them. It was a place where the sunlight could not reach. The depths of the sea were filled with a mysterious aura. As they explored the sea, a few cultivators with higher cultivations on the surface of the sea faintly sensed something. They rose into the air and used their spiritual sense to scan the bottom of the sea. They could not help but be surprised. Someone went into the sea. And judging from the movement of the water, the other party should have a water avoidance pearl. What? A water avoidance pearl? Who would have such a treasure? When the people by the sea heard this, they couldn't help but exclaim. They looked at the sea, but they couldn't see anything. They could only see some faint ripples on the surface of the sea. After a while, they disappeared without a trace. As time passed, Luo Yu and Gu Mo's search area at the bottom of the sea gradually widened and deepened. In the sea, the two of them released their pressure. Hence, the water monsters at the bottom of the sea did not dare to approach them. Furthermore, with the water avoidance pearl protecting them, they were relatively safe. The two of them searched from dawn to dusk. When they reached the bottom of the sea, there was not much difference between day and night to them. Hence, they did not plan on going back to rest. Instead, they continued to release their spiritual sense to search. Wait! Gu Mo suddenly called out and pulled Luo Yu back. What's wrong? Did you discover something? Luo Yu stopped and turned around to ask. Over there. My spiritual sense seems to have encountered something that I can't get close to. Let's go in that direction. Gu Mo held a luminous pearl in one hand to illuminate the area and pointed in a dark direction with the other hand. Alright, let's go there and take a look. Luo Yu controlled the water avoidance pearl to change direction and walked in the direction Gu Mo had pointed. Under their feet, the seaweed, corals, and rocks of various colors entered their eyes. The water around them was clear and blue, especially under the illumination of the night pearls. It was even more beautiful. With great difficulty, they finally made a discovery. The two of them quickened their pace and headed in that direction. As they gradually got closer, they discovered that they were unable to get any closer. This was because about 10 meters in front of them, there was a powerful aura protecting the central point. Not only were they unable to approach, even their divine sense was unable to penetrate that powerful aura to explore what was in the depths. This aura seems to be the aura of an ancient divine beast. Moreover, it seems to be somewhat similar to the aura of the green dragon, Gu Mo said thoughtfully. He looked at the dark place in front of him and his heart skipped a beat. Could the Yama Lord be in there? He looked at Luo Yu and asked. Chapter 4705. Gu Mo looked at him and asked, Are we not going to investigate? How? That aura is so strong, can you even get close? And if the Yama Lord is really in there, we can't force our way in, right? If we accidentally hurt the Yama Lord, how are we going to explain it to Master? Luo Yu glanced at the place and said, Let's go up first and leave a sign here. After notifying Master, we'll wait for Master to make a decision. After all, even if we can't get close, it doesn't mean that Master can't. Hearing this, Gu Mo nodded. Then let's go. Luo Yu held the water avoidance pearl in his hand and rose up with Luo Yu, directly flying up to the surface of the sea. When the two of them flew up, it took them about half an incense's time to fly up from the bottom of the sea and stand on the surface of the sea. I didn't expect to go so deep. If it wasn't for the water avoidance pearl, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to enter this deep sea. Luo Yu exclaimed. After the two of them came out of the water, they looked around and realized that they couldn't see the seaside anymore. Because the sky was dark, everything was pitch black and their vision was obstructed. Gu Mo took out a flying ship from the space and the two of them jumped onto it. The flying ship didn't fly away but stopped above the place where they came out of the sea. I don't know if Master is out of seclusion. I'll contact Du Fan or Ling Shuang first and inform them of the news we found here. Luo Yu said as he took out his communication jade token. You stay here and guard. I'll go explore and see how far this place is from the seaside. As Guemo spoke, he raised his chi and left on his sword, heading in the direction where his divine sense had detected the presence of people. As the night deepened, some cultivators patrolling the sea found the flying ship. The cultivators who found the flying ship looked at each other and went forward. This is the East Sea Spirit region. We're patrolling the sea under the orders of the South Qing monarch. Who are you? Why did the flying ship stop in the East Sea Spirit region? If there's nothing important, please leave quickly. Luo Yu, who was communicating with Du Fan and the others, heard the voice and glanced at them. He held the communication jade tablet in his hand and stepped forward. Standing in the spaceship, he glanced at the cultivators and said, I am Luo Yu, one of the 8 leaders of the Phoenix Guards under the Ghost Doctor. I came to the East Sea Spirit region under the orders of my master. You can patrol your seas. Don't worry about me. Hearing that it was actually one of the leaders of the Phoenix Guards under the Ghost Doctor, the few cultivators were startled and carefully sized up Luo Yu. After a long while, they cupped their hands and said, We didn't know that it was the leader of the Phoenix Guards under the Ghost Doctor. Please forgive us if we have offended you. It's just that the Eastern Sea Spirit region has not been peaceful recently. I know about this. However, there are quite a number of cultivators gathered at the seaside. Since you are the Sea Patrol Guards, you should naturally go and deal with them. Luo Yu said in a low voice. His gaze was filled with pressure as it landed on them. Perhaps because the difference in strength was too great, the few of them did not dare to say anything under his gaze. Instead, they bowed and responded and left first. After they went further away, they quickly took out their communication jade and sent the news back. Chapter 4706. Don't worry, I've already found it. It's quite a distance from the sea. Guemo took the spirit fruit and sat down beside him, asking, Have you contacted Du Fan and the rest? I've contacted them, and they're already on their way. Master is here too. He grinned, saying, Du Fan said that Master had finished refining the elixir. Once he came out of seclusion and heard that we were coming to the East Sea, he brought the rest over. They're just a few days later than us, but with Master's speed, they'll probably arrive here tomorrow morning. That's great. When Guemo heard this, he couldn't help but smile. But just now, a few people came to patrol the sea. They said that they were the South Qing sovereign's men, and I sent them away. Luo Yu said thoughtfully, Does the East Sea Spirit region belong to the South Qing sovereign? Why do I remember that this place isn't under his jurisdiction? The East, South, West and North Sea regions aren't under his jurisdiction, but it's normal for there to be people patrolling. Guemo said, looking at the dark sea in the distance, saying, After all, there are many treasures in the sea. If there weren't people patrolling, the treasures at the bottom of the sea would have been emptied sooner or later. Let's have a good rest tonight. Next, we just have to wait for Master and the rest to arrive. Luo Yu said, stretching his back, and went into the cabin to rest. The next day, when it was close to noon, Fengjiu and the rest arrived. Luo Yu, who had been waiting by the sea for a long time, grinned when he saw them, and quickly stepped forward, Master. Fengjiu smiled and nodded at him. He looked around and asked, Where's Guemo? Master, Guemo is waiting on the flying ship on the sea. I'll bring you there now. He said, and after greeting Du Fan, Leng Hua, and Ling Shuang, he brought them to the flying ship. Isn't that the Ghost Doctor? Why is she here? Someone recognized Fengjiu and couldn't help but whisper. It's the Ghost Doctor. Could it be that there really are treasures in the sea? So she's been lured here. Who is the Ghost Doctor? What treasures hasn't she seen? In my opinion, this matter isn't so simple. Why don't we go and take a look? They seemed to be heading towards the center of the sea. Someone suggested and wanted to go and take a look, but no one agreed. Instead, they all looked at him as if he was an idiot. His curiosity that had been raised with great difficulty immediately withered. On the other side, Feng Jiu and the rest followed Luo Yu to the spaceship. When Guemo saw her, he bowed and greeted, "Master. Master, you must not have had a good rest on the way here. Take a seat first. Let me tell you about our findings," Luo Yu said as he invited her to board the spaceship. Seeing this, Feng Jiu nodded and sat down in the spaceship. Then, he asked, "In your communication jade, you said that there was a powerful presence below that you couldn't get close to. But the presence felt like the presence of an azure dragon? What the hell is going on?" "Master, we searched at the bottom of the sea for a long time. When we reached a place, we couldn't go any further. Also, our divine senses couldn't detect it. But the presence was very similar to the azure dragons. We were wondering if the Yama Lord was at the bottom of the sea." Luo Yu glanced at her and said, "Master, why don't I bring you down to take a look first? Is this the position of the flying ship?" Feng Jiu asked. Chapter 4707. Hearing this, Feng Jiu stood up and walked to the side of the ship. She closed her eyes and released her divine sense. Her divine sense kept extending downwards. When it reached a certain level, her divine sense touched a familiar aura and she suddenly opened her eyes. "It's him. He must be down there," she said with certainty. Her heart was filled with excitement. However, after the excitement, she was even more confused. She did sense the green dragon's aura, but Moze's aura was extremely weak. How badly did the heavenly lightning injure him that day? Why did he sink into the East Sea spiritual region? Move away a little. Don't stop here. I'll go down and take a look. Feng Jiu turned around and instructed. "Master, don't you need us to go down with you?" Luo Yu stepped forward and asked. "No need. Just wait here." She shook her head and took out a water avoidance pearl from the space. Then, she leaped into the sea. Seeing that she was going down alone, Luo Yu could not help but worry. He leaned against the side of the ship and watched for a while. Then, he turned around and looked at them. "Will Master be okay going down alone? She didn't rest during the journey. Will she be okay in this state?" "Don't worry. Master knows what to do." Du Fan smiled and said to Guemo, "Let's move the ship away so that Master won't cause any commotion and affect the ship." "Okay," Guemo replied. He controlled the spaceship to fly to a spot not too far away, leaving some distance between them. On the other side, when the southern city monarch found out that Feng Jiu's people had gone to the East Sea spiritual region, he was slightly surprised. He only asked them to keep an eye on them and see what they were going to do there. Not long after, news came that even Feng Jiu had appeared in the East Sea spiritual region. This made him curious. Why did she go to the East Sea spiritual region? Could it be that the strange phenomenon in the East Sea had something to do with her? Thus, he ordered his people to keep an eye on them. If there were any movements, they were to report back. After all, Ghost Dr. Feng Jiu was not an ordinary person. Naturally, she could not be treated in a normal way. Compared to the southern city monarch's guesses and curiosity, Feng Jiu was now deep in the sea. A water avoidance pearl and a luminous pearl floated in front of her. The spiritual aura around her also created a current so that the surrounding seawater could not splash on her body. She slowly walked forward step by step and came to the place where the aura was surging. Indeed, it felt like a protective shield. Although the luminous pearl's radiance was shining, it could not be seen very far. Thus, she closed her eyes and concentrated her divine sense in front of her. At this moment, she felt that the pure spiritual aura in the sea was surging slightly and seeping into the place protected by the current. It was as if something was absorbing the pure spiritual aura in the sea. The Azure Dragon's ancient aura was surging, and her divine sense could even see that in the center of the defensive barrier, the Azure Dragon's aura was protecting a sleeping figure. And that person was her husband, Xianyuan Mose, whom she had been unable to find all this time. Mose, Mose, that she called out softly and repeatedly, trying to wake him up. However, he was sleeping peacefully, as if his 5 senses and 6 senses were sealed. Chapter 4708. Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible at the bottom of the sea. She stood there quietly and calmed herself down. Then, she stretched out her hand and pressed against the aura in front of her. The spiritual aura on her body surged along with the ancient pressure in her body. A pure spiritual aura gushed out from her palm. The surrounding seawater surged because of the surging aura on her body. As her palm turned, a clear shout came from her mouth. Break! A clear shout that contained a powerful pressure and aura came out. The sound shook the water in the sea, and on the surface of the sea, each wave was more turbulent than the last. As soon as Fengjiu's voice fell, a visible spiritual aura spread out from her palm. In the bottom of the sea, there seemed to be a faint cracking sound. Then, the isolated aura dissipated in the bottom of the sea and disappeared into the seawater. The isolated aura dissipated. Under the illumination of the night pearl, the scene in the water in front of her gradually became clear. She saw him floating in the water with a pure spiritual aura surging from his body. The Azure Dragon's aura wrapped around him and protected him very well. She quickly walked up to him and reached out to hug him. However, the moment she touched him, she was stunned. She stood there stiffly and her eyes widened in disbelief. Panic appeared in her eyes. Mose that she watched as her hand passed through his body. He was clearly in front of her, but she couldn't touch his body. Or rather, he didn't have a body at all. He was just an illusory existence. How could this be? How could this be? Mose, Mose, wake up. It's me. I'm here. Open your eyes and look at me. She called out again and again. Her heart was filled with fear and helplessness. He was clearly here and right in front of her, but in reality, she couldn't touch him. It was as if he was far away on the horizon. She called out again and again, but he was still in a deep sleep and didn't react at all. Gradually, she realized that his body was fading. This discovery made her even more flustered. She couldn't help but reach out to touch him again. Still, she couldn't touch him and her hand passed through his body. Mose, what's wrong with you? How can I save you? What can I do to save you? Her tears fell uncontrollably, and when her tears fell on his seemingly illusory body, the body that was fading away seemed to solidify a little. The water that had been repelled by the water avoidance pearl gradually surged towards him under the surge of the Azure Dragon aura on his body, surrounding his entire body. When his body was surrounded by the sea water, his body that had been gradually fading returned to its original state. It looked as if he was quietly lying there, sleeping. Seeing this scene, Fengjiu took a step back. She raised her hand and wiped the tears in her eyes. She said softly but with determination, "No matter what method, I must wake you up." Chapter 4709. She took a deep look at Xianyuan Mose and retreated step by step. Finally, she formed an ancient seal with both hands, isolating the area once again. As the enchantment spread out, a layer of water rippled around her. In the next moment, she flicked her sleeve and put away the luminous pearl. Holding the water avoidance pearl in her hand, she spun around and headed towards the surface of the sea. Du Fan and the others were waiting in the airship. They watched the waves on the surface of the sea surge up several feet high. They couldn't help but wonder if their master had found the whereabouts of the Yama Lord. As time passed, they noticed that there were other cultivators not far away from them on the surface of the sea. They seemed to be watching their movements. After a while, a red figure spun up from the bottom of the sea. The red figure spun in the air, and as she spun, water droplets flew out. After a while, the wet dress became dry again, and there was no trace of water on it. Master. Seeing her emerge from the bottom of the sea, the people on the airship couldn't help but be delighted. However, after a moment of surprise, they realized that their master had come out alone. The Yama Lord was still nowhere to be seen. For a moment, they couldn't help but look at each other, and the smiles on their faces faded. Fengjiu stood on the surface of the sea for a long time. His red robes fluttered in the wind, and his ink-black hair fluttered. His beautiful face carried a hint of coldness. His gaze contained the pressure of a superior person as he faintly swept across the people around him. Then, he gathered his chi and swept over to the airship. Send a message back. Send a group of Phoenix Guards to patrol this area. Fengjiu ordered indifferently. Hearing this, the few of them looked at each other. Luo Yu used his elbow to lightly nudge Du Fan beside him, indicating that he should ask the question. Seeing this, Du Fan responded and said, "Yes, this subordinate will send a message back in a moment. Send a group of Phoenix Guards here." As soon as he finished speaking, he paused and asked again, "Master, did you find anything at the bottom of the sea? Is the Yama Lord down there?" "He's down there, but his condition isn't very good. I can't bring him up, so I can only leave him here," Fengjiu said softly, with a trace of helplessness and unconcealable worry in his voice. "The Azure Dragon's vital energy is protecting him and nourishing his spirit. Below, I've set up a new barrier. Have our people patrol this area of the sea area and don't let anyone disturb him." "Yes, this subordinate understands, Master," Du Fan replied. Seeing Du Fan's words, he didn't speak. How long would it take to nourish the soul? Luo Yu couldn't help but ask. Leng Hua glanced at him and said, "Master's mood isn't very good. Let's do as Master says." Master didn't say anything else, so let's not ask too much. "Yes, I understand," Luo Yu replied. He glanced at the sea surface and couldn't help but sigh. "Should we park the spaceship here or go to the beach?" Guemo asked the few of them. Chapter 47:10. On this day, Fengjiu did not come out after entering the cabin. Du Fan and the others knew that she must be in a very low mood and did not dare to disturb her. At this time, they could only leave her alone to calm down. Fengjiu stayed in the cabin for a day. During this day, she thought about a lot of things. In the end, she sorted out her emotions and made up her mind. It was not until the next morning that she walked out of the cabin. "Master, you're awake. Master, take a seat first. I'll get you a cup of water." Leng Shuang saw her come out and said with a smile, "No need." Fengjiu gestured and walked to the side of the ship. She looked at the sea and said, "Call them all out. I have something to tell them." "Okay." Leng Shuang responded and then went to knock on the cabin door where the others were resting. "Master." Du Fan and the others came out and came in front of her. They bowed to her. Fengjiu turned to look at them and said, "I'm going out to travel and train my mind in preparation for ascension. I called you all out to tell you to guard this place well and not let anyone disturb him in the bottom of the sea. After the Phoenix Guards arrive here, one of you will have to take the lead to guard this place every once in a while." Hearing her words, everyone was startled. They looked at each other and said in unison, "Master, don't worry. We will definitely guard this sea area well and not let anyone disturb the spirit of the Yama Lord." After they finished speaking, Luo Yu could not help but ask, "Master, how long will you be traveling for? How long will you be back?" Fengjiu shook her head and said softly, "I don't know." She turned to look at the sea and said, "What I lack is an opportunity. Moreover, too many things have happened in the past few years. There are too many things in my heart. I also need to walk around and see the various states of the world. I need to polish my state of mind and prepare for ascension. She looked at the sky and said coldly, when a supreme being ascends, if he succeeds, he will live as long as the heavens and the earth. If he fails, his cultivation will be destroyed and there will never be a second chance. When Mose failed to ascend, it was because the people above wanted to kill him. If Tianjizi did not save him with his life, his spirit would not have been hidden in the deep sea to be nourished. As for me, I have to undergo 9 tribulations and 81 bolts of heavenly lightning. I can only succeed and not fail. She did not have a second chance and she would not allow herself to fail. Because, there was not only their child waiting for her up there, but also the enemy she wanted to destroy. When Du Fan heard her words, he immediately knelt down on one knee and said in a sonorous and powerful voice, "Master, please be at ease. We swear to protect the Yama Master with our lives, and we won't let anyone harm his divine soul. We will wait here for Master to return from her travels. Let's congratulate Master on your successful ascension and live as long as the heavens and the earth." Hearing this, Fengjiu looked at them and the corners of her lips rose slightly. She said, "Get up. I believe that you will do what I have asked you to do." The few of them then stood up and looked at her, who was leaning against the boat. Her expression was indifferent as she looked into the distance, as if she was thinking about something. The few of them stood quietly and their gazes fell on her. None of them said a word. At this moment, their master gave them the feeling that she would go far away at any time and they would not be able to catch her even if they wanted to. Chapter 47:11. At the same time, in Cloud Sky Mountain. On this day, Emperor Qing brought his 3 disciples out to participate in the annual competition. The 3 of them sat on the aircraft with him. After leaving Cloud Sky Mountain, they had been flying in the sky, looking down and passing by many places. However, their master had never told them what they were going to compete in this annual competition. Ever since they had been cultivating by their master's side, the competition that was held every half a year was a chance for them to learn from each other. As for the competition this time around, their master didn't even mention a single word about it. As such, they still didn't know how they were going to compete in this annual competition. Yu, who was sitting in the middle of her 2 elder brothers, thought about how their master usually doted on her the most, so her pair of beautiful eyes rolled, then with all smiles, she opened her mouth and asked, "Master, what are we going to compete in this year's competition? Is Master taking us to compete with others?" Emperor Qing sat quietly with his eyes closed. When he heard her question, he didn't even open his eyes. He only said indifferently, "Don't worry, you will know soon." Hearing this, Yu glanced at her 2 brothers and stuck out her tongue helplessly. At about noon, Emperor Qing, who had his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked at Mu Qin and Mu Yu. He said, "Master will give you a month's time. After a month, you must return to Cloud Sky Mountain alone with 100 crystal cores that you have hunted. You are not allowed to use them or fly back. Instead, you have to walk back. After a month, if you are unable to return to Cloud Sky Mountain, then you will be punished. Master wants us to hunt for 100 crystal cores each and then walk back to Cloud Sky Mountain alone. Can't we go together?" Mu Qin couldn't help but ask. Their master's aircraft took an entire morning to arrive here. If they walked, how long would it take to return to Cloud Sky Mountain? "Yes, you can't go together. You have to walk back alone," Emperor Qing said indifferently. He looked at them and said, "Master will separate 3 strands of divine sense on you. Master will know all of your actions. If you are in danger, you have to learn how to save yourself. However, when you encounter danger that you cannot resolve, you can also call for Master to save you. However, when you call for Master to save you, that person will also withdraw from the competition and return to Cloud Sky Mountain to accept the punishment of failure." Hearing this, Yu blinked and asked curiously, "Master, what is the punishment if we fail?" Emperor Qin glanced at her and said, "The punishment for the two of you is that you can only eat fasting pills for a year. You are not allowed to eat the 5 grains. Moreover, you have to be separated and are not allowed to meet or cultivate with the other two." Hearing this, Mu Chen and Mu Yu's little faces suddenly became serious. They didn't want to eat fasting pills. They didn't want to be separated from each other. They wanted to cultivate together every day, talk together, and grow together. If they didn't see each other for a year and were alone, the scene would be unimaginable. Chapter 47:12. Emperor Qin glanced at the two of them, and his eyes fell on Hao-er again. He said, "Yun Chen, you are stronger than them, so you have to hunt for 300 crystal cores. You also have to walk back to Cloud Sky Mountain alone within a month. If you fail to do so, the punishment will be the same as above, but with an extra point. You will be delayed from seeing your mother for a year." He knew what the 3 children cared about, so although this punishment didn't seem like a punishment, it was what they cared about the most. Sure enough, Hao-er nodded solemnly. "Master, don't worry. I know. I will definitely return to Cloud Sky Mountain within a month." Emperor Qin nodded and said, "The 3 of you have to act alone and can't help each other. The beasts I picked for you are of different grades. Yun Chen, you go down first. The beasts in this forest are stronger, so be careful." "Yes." Hao-er replied and looked at Mu Chen and Mu Yu. "You have to be careful too. I'll see you on the mountain." "Yes, yes. Big brother, you have to be careful too." Mu Chen and Mu Yu said in unison. They watched him call out his flying sword and go down to the forest alone. After a while, he disappeared from their sight. "Are you afraid?" Emperor Qin looked at them and asked. "No." The two of them shook their heads. Although they were young, they had encountered many things. When they were younger, they had wandered outside with their big brother. Moreover, after they returned to their mother's side, their mother taught them many things. They had also learned a lot from their master. At least, when they were in danger, they could think of a way to save themselves. Moreover, their master also said that he would separate a strand of divine consciousness to protect them. In addition, they had contracted beasts, so they weren't afraid at all. However, not being afraid didn't mean not being worried. After all, this was their first time acting alone, and it would take a month. Looking at the expressions in their eyes, Emperor Qin smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, go down." He sent the two of them to different parts of the forest and didn't stop. He just told them to be careful and left. The 3 children were in the same forest, but in different places. When they were alone, the feeling of isolation and helplessness hit them in the face. Other than themselves, there were only trees and weeds, and the faint roars of beasts that could be heard. After Hao-er landed, he quickly scouted the forest to look for prey. 3 crystal cores meant that he had to kill 300 beasts and then leave this place on foot. However, he only had a month's time. It could be said that time was very tight. Although his strength had improved in the past year, he didn't dare to be careless in this forest. Instead, he braced himself and dealt with it carefully. On the other side, not far from where Mu Chen landed, there was a ferocious beast lying in ambush in the bushes. When the beast saw him, it approached cautiously and bared its sharp teeth, ready to pounce on him. However, it saw the human child, who was originally standing still, jump up and straddle its back. A cold dagger was aimed at its neck. Chapter 47:13. Blood dripped on the ground, dyeing those flattened weeds under the feet of this ferocious beast red. Mu Chen's dagger had cut down, but this ferocious beast still didn't die. Instead it violently swung and bumped about, attempting to throw off the human child who was sitting on its back. Mu Chen's legs tightly clamped the body of this ferocious beast, and one hand hugged the head of this ferocious beast, while the other hand increased the strength of the dagger. He didn't dare to pull out the dagger, rather clamped the body of this ferocious beast and increased the strength of the dagger in his hand. Hearing a hissing sound, the speed of that ferocious beast gradually slowed down, until finally the body of this ferocious beast swayed a few times, and directly fell down. Mu Chen gasped for breath, and a layer of sweat seeped out from his forehead. He came down from the body of this ferocious beast, and once again checked, confirming that this ferocious beast was already dead. Only then did he lightly exhaled, and quickly used the dagger to dig out the beast crystal, then quickly left. On the other side, Yu was walking in the forest, and seeing that there were actually many low-level elixirs in the forest, she couldn't help but happily smiled. While she was picking them, she also put them inside her space. At this moment, it was noon, and some beasts were out looking for food. When a long-tusked boar with hard thorns all over its body came out from the forest, and seeing that little human who was squatting on the ground digging for elixirs, the saliva in its mouth immediately flowed out, and even its breathing became coarse. Hearing the movement, Yu raised her head, and saw that ferocious beast with long tusks in its mouth which somewhat resembled a pig was staring at her while drooling. She couldn't help but blinked her eyes, and somewhat blankly looked at it. Her brain quickly spun, this long-tusked boar's body was so big, and the black hair on its body was like black thorns, looking strangely frightening. Moreover, those two sharp teeth which were protruding from its mouth seemed to be very sharp. Her pair of beautiful eyes quickly circled around its body, and discovered that this long-tusked boar appeared to be very difficult to deal with. She immediately stood up, and quickly retreated. Roar! Seeing her move, that long-tusked boar issued a beast roar, and with a big stride, it pounced towards Yu. Seeing this, Yu hastily tiptoed and jumped to a big tree. She lowered her head and looked at that pig below. It was in the process of circling around the big tree, trying to break the tree. Seeing this, she borrowed strength from her hand and jumped up. She sat down on a branch of the big tree and patted her chest, lightly exhaling, "Phew, I was scared to death." As soon as she finished speaking, there was a loud crash from under the tree. The tree shook a little, and she, who was sitting on the tree, also swayed a little. She was so frightened that she quickly hugged the tree to stabilize her body. She lowered her head and saw that the tusked boar was ramming into the tree. Pieces of bark were falling off the tree. Seeing this, her beautiful big eyes turned and a sly light flashed across them like a fox. She took out a slingshot from her space, and also took out an iron ball, aiming at the head of that ferocious beast below. She fiercely shot the iron ball. The iron ball shot and fell on the head of that ferocious beast. Although it wasn't fatal, but it was still painful, causing that ferocious beast to roar even more. But after Yu shot several iron beads in succession, that ferocious beast raised its head and roared towards her. Immediately the slingshot in her hand was pulled open again, and a pill flew out and directly entered the mouth of that ferocious beast which was roaring loudly. Chapter 47:14. She looked from the tree, and after that ferocious beast swallowed the medicine she had thrown into its mouth, it lowered its head and roared like a human, as if it wanted to spit out the medicine in its mouth. She grinned and once again shot an iron ball towards it. Roar! That ferocious beast raised its head and roared towards Yu, as if it had been provoked. Its two legs moved on the ground, and it seemed to want to jump up the tree. Merely, insignificant tusked boar, even if it was a ferocious beast, it was still unable to climb up the tree. After trying twice, it howled, then unexpectedly turned around and ran away. Seeing this, Yu chased after it with a beaming smile. She was determined to get the crystallic nucleus of this prey. She couldn't let it run away. Yu's pill gradually took effect along with the running of that ferocious beast. The speed of that ferocious beast gradually slowed down, and finally with a bang, it knocked down in front of a tree. Hee. Yu grinned and followed after it. She didn't approach it, rather picked up a branch and poked it. Seeing that it was not moving, she walked forward. She took out her dagger and slit the tusked boar's neck. When the dagger slit its throat, the tusked boar's body twitched as if it was about to wake up. However, it died because of the fatal slash. She dug out that crystallic nucleus, and also took out some low-level elixirs that she had picked before, and after crushing them, she smeared the juice on the body of this ferocious beast. After that she took out a small flag used to set up formation from her space, and set up a formation in the surroundings. After that she found a place to hide. She was small and her strength was also not big, and her battle prowess was not as strong as her two elder brothers. So it was also not that easy for her to gather 100 crystallic nuclei. But she could use her brain, and she could use the things she had learned. Like this, she didn't need to worry about hunting less than 100 ferocious beasts. 3 people were scattered in 3 corners of this forest. Because they knew that their master would secretly protect them, they didn't need to worry about other people, and only focused on their own matters. 6 days later, was hiding inside a small cave, counting the number of crystallic nuclei she had hunted these days. 48, 49, 50, 53. She looked at the small pile of multicolored crystallic nuclei in front of her, and her eyes shined with excitement. 53 nuclei. I still need 47 nuclei to gather 100 nuclei. She seriously counted with her fingers, while muttering, 53 nuclei, I used 6 days' time, almost killed 9 ferocious beasts. If I want to gather 100 nuclei within 10 days, then in the following 4 days, in 1 day, I have to. She blinked her eyes and seriously counted with her fingers as she muttered to herself. That serious look on her face made her look a little silly and adorable. Finally, after much difficulty, she put the crystal nuclei back into the space, took out a spirit fruit and ate it. Then, she got up and walked out with her 2 short legs. She had set up a trap outside, and now she could go and see if there were any beasts that had fallen into the trap. She had made the places, herself, she to wear, which she was to walk, her, and her to make, war, she was to be to herself to, when she was walking. Chapter 47:15. She looked at that fainted person, but didn't step forward, rather first went to check several beasts, and after confirming that they had fainted due to her medicine, she used her dagger to kill them, and dug out their crystallic nucleus. After settling the beasts, she walked to the front of that person and looked at him. The other party seemed to be 7 or 8 years old little boy, and there were wounds all over his body. Some seemed to be wounds caused by the claws of beasts, but there were also some wounds caused by swords. She had studied medicine for quite some time, so naturally she could also see that the wounds caused by swords were very serious, and ought to be caused by the determination to kill him. She took out a small bottle from her space, and after opening it, she placed it in front of that little boy's nose and let him smell it. After a while, she saw his eyelashes lightly trembling, and he opened his eyes. However, after the other party opened his eyes, his hands instinctively pushed her away. She didn't notice, and directly fell to the ground. "Why are you pushing me?" Unhappily glared at him, then patting her clothes, she stood up and said, "I saved you." The little boy was startled, as if he saw that the person before his eyes was a little girl who was even younger than him. He immediately became somewhat nervous, and also somewhat embarrassed, and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." Just after speaking, the little boy lowered his head, and with red eyes, tears fell down. Seeing this, couldn't help but was startled, and promptly said, "I also didn't hit you, and also didn't scold you, why are you crying?" It was fine if you, didn't ask, because when she asked, the little boy suddenly cried, I am trapped here and can't go out, I am trapped here for a whole night, and there are also several ferocious beasts here, I am afraid that I will be eaten by them." Hearing these words, blinked her eyes, then looking at him, she somewhat blankly asked, "How did you run in here? You ran into this formation, could it be that when you came in, these ferocious beasts also didn't faint? So you stayed with several ferocious beasts for a whole night? Someone wanted to kill me. I ran and ran, but I couldn't get out of here. There were a few ferocious beasts here. The wounds on my back were caused by those ferocious beasts. Later, I climbed up a tree to avoid being eaten. After that, I fell down and fainted." He wiped his tears and cried. His voice was choked, but his words were still clear. Hearing this, Yu somewhat embarrassedly scratched her little braid, and embarrassedly said, "That, this formation was arranged by me, I used it to catch ferocious beasts, but I didn't expect that someone would break in." She had put medicine to lure ferocious beasts, and some medicine that would make ferocious beasts faint after smelling it for a long time. It was a miracle that this person was not eaten by those ferocious beasts after entering the array she had set up. You set up the array?" The little boy stared at the little girl who was even shorter than him in disbelief. "Yes. This array was taught to me by my master. Not to mention you, even if Jindan stage cultivators came in, they also wouldn't be able to get out," she said while beaming with smiles. Then staring at the wounds on his body, she said, "I will help you bandage your wounds. The wounds caused by ferocious beasts must be cleaned, otherwise it will get infected." Finished speaking, Yu didn't wait for him to speak, and took out medicine to help him clean and bandage his wounds. Hearing the rumbling sound coming from his stomach, she happily said, "I will treat you to eat meat. I have been here for several days, but I haven't met a single person. You are the first person I have met." Chapter 47:16. Yu looked at him with a beaming smile, but didn't answer, rather said, "This place is very dangerous, you should quickly leave. Otherwise if you encounter ferocious beasts, it will be troublesome. I know which way to go out, I will tell you." The little boy was dumbfounded for a moment, then somewhat hesitantly said, "I can't go to the path I came from, those people will definitely be guarding there, and if I go out, they will kill me. Rest assured, there is more than one path leading to the outside." Yu said with a beaming smile, then took out a piece of dried meat from her space and handed it over to him, then said, "I roasted this yesterday, you can eat it." "Many thanks." The little boy answered, then after receiving the dried meat, tore off a piece and ate it, then asked, "Are you also going out with me?" "I'm still not going, I still haven't finished my matter here. I still have to stay here for another 4 days." She shook her head, then walked over and removed the formation. Then after walking for a period of time, she pointed at a direction and said, "You can go out by following this direction. I have already seen, after going out from that direction, there is a mountain path. If you go along this mountain path, you can go to a place with people." But the little boy didn't leave, rather hesitated, and said, "I don't dare to go by myself, I am afraid I will encounter ferocious beasts, I can't beat them." Hearing these words, Yu blinked her eyes and stared at him for a good while, then as if somewhat vexed, she wrinkled her delicate little face and said, "You don't dare to go by yourself? Now I also can't send you away, because that will waste my time. How about you stay here with me for a few days, and at that time you will go out together with me?" "Okay." The little boy nodded his head, then looking at her, he said, "My name is Lin Yang, what about you?" "My name is Yun Qi." Yu said with a beaming smile, then said, "I am going to look for ferocious beasts, do you want to come with me?" "Look for ferocious beasts? You are not afraid?" he asked in a daze. "Not afraid, because I am very powerful." Her pair of beautiful eyes curved into crescent moon, and her eyes were filled with fox-like crafty radiance. When Lin Yang heard this, he hesitated for a moment before saying, "Then I'll go with you to take a look." Therefore, Yu, who had been alone for a few days, finally had a little companion to accompany her to talk. She took Lin Yang and walked towards other formation point, wanting to see whether other formation points had trapped ferocious beasts or not. Arriving at another place, after both of them entered the formation, they saw 5 ferocious beasts lying motionless on the ground. Yu happily stepped forward and said, "Perhaps I can leave this place in 3 days." As she spoke, she walked towards the ferocious beast. At the same time, she took out her dagger and prepared to stab the beast again. Suddenly, a ferocious beast that was lying motionless on the ground jumped up and pounced towards her with a low roar. "Be careful." When Lin Yang saw this scene, his face turned pale with fright and he instinctively cried out. Yu also didn't expect that there would actually be a ferocious beast that was pretending to be unconscious lying in ambush here, but her reaction was also very fast. Almost at the same time that ferocious beast pounced, she stepped to one side, avoiding the pounce and bite of that ferocious beast. "Quickly climb the tree. Quickly Yu shouted towards Lin Yang who was still foolishly standing on the other side. Chapter 47:17. Roar. Quickly climb up the tree. That ferocious beast is a holy beast, quickly climb up the tree. Yu anxiously shouted. Seeing that ferocious beast was roaring and pouncing towards Lin Yang, she didn't have time to dodge, rather raised her chi and rushed to his side, and when that ferocious beast was pouncing towards him, she quickly brought him to dodge. "Go up, quickly go up." Yu pushed him, and borrowed his strength to let him climb up the tree first. After he jumped up the tree, she turned her head to look, and that ferocious beast instantly pounced towards her. "Yunqi, quickly come up. Quickly come up Lin Yang exclaimed. When he saw that ferocious beast pouncing towards her, he thought that she was going to die without a doubt, but who would have thought that instead of dodging, she held the dagger in her hand and faced it head-on. "Yunqi, you don't want to live anymore." He shouted loudly, and was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. At this moment, Yu didn't pay attention to him, rather raised her spirit to 120%. Although she had used medicine to deal with those ferocious beasts in this period of time, and thus easily dug out the crystallic nucleus, but her skill was also trained by her master and 2 brothers, so even if she couldn't compare with her 2 brothers, but she also wasn't that weak. Now that this ferocious beast was about to pounce and bite her, even if she dodged again and again, she wouldn't be able to solve the problem. Since it was like this, she might as well fight with all her strength. Roar. The roar of the holy beast resounded, causing her ears to ring. Although there was an ancient mythological beast within her body, but in order to not let them sense the ancient mythological beast within their body, their master had sealed the aura of their body. Otherwise, not to mention this holy beast, even if a mythological beast appeared, it also wouldn't dare to approach her side. She used the exquisite agility skill that she had painstakingly trained for 1 year to dodge, and taking advantage of this opportunity, she stabbed the dagger in her hand towards the buttocks of that holy beast. The sound of the sharp dagger stabbing into the buttocks of that holy beast was accompanied by the blood-curdling scream of that holy beast. Because of the injury on its buttocks, that holy beast became even more violent, and violently pounced towards Yu. Yu nimbly dodged using her petite figure, and seeing that holy beast pouncing towards her, she clenched her teeth, and instantly bent her waist, and got under the body of that ferocious beast, then stabbed the sharp dagger in her hand upwards. Roar! Blood as if a blood pillar splashed out, sprinkling all over Yu. After she stabbed that holy beast, she nimbly turned around and flashed out from under its body, then quickly retreated to dodge. As for the holy beast, it roared and scurried for a few meters before its body twitched and collapsed. Soon, the ground was dyed red with its blood. The holy beast twitched a few times before stiffening and dying. Seeing this scene, Yu took a deep breath, and her hand that was holding the dagger slightly trembled. That dagger she had stabbed too ruthlessly, and her strength was extremely heavy, to the extent that her hand that was holding the dagger was somewhat unable to open. However, when she saw the ferocious beast lying motionless on the ground, she knew that this time, the ferocious beast was dead. Thinking that in addition to obtaining the crystal core on its head, he could also obtain the inner core in its body, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. After taking a deep breath, he walked forward. Chapter 47:18. Especially when he saw the little person using a dagger to dig out the sacred beast's crystal core, then cut open the sacred beast's abdomen and took out the sacred beast's inner core. That bloody scene and the little person seemed very strange no matter how one looked at it. At this moment, he couldn't help but guess, in the end, what kind of family's child was this Yunqi. She was obviously younger than him, moreover she was still a little girl, but how could her courage be so big? Lin Yang, today let's roast some meat to eat. Freshly roasted meat will be more tender and more delicious, moreover this is still a holy beast, so we can make its meat into jerky. Yu said with a beaming smile. Staring at this holy beast on the ground, she was already thinking about how to eat it. However, after a long time, she didn't hear any movement, so she raised her head to look, and saw he was hugging a big tree with a stiff complexion, so she waved her hand and called, "Quickly come down, Ah. Help me pick up the branches, you have to do something to have something to eat." Okay. He swallowed his saliva and answered, then coming down from the big tree, he carefully walked to her side, then looking at her, he asked, "Yunqi, you, in the end who are you? How can you kill such a holy beast?" I already said that I am very powerful." She mysteriously smiled, then quickly finished off other few ferocious beasts, and putting away the crystal core, she said, "Help me drag this holy beast back to the cave, then pick up the branches, I will teach you how to roast meat." Seeing she didn't say anything, he had no choice but to agree, then helping her to drag that holy beast out of the formation, they arrived at a small cave. "Is this the place where you live?" Lin Yang looked at the cave. This small cave was approximately 2 meters deep, and there were trees all around, so it was not too easy to find. I will live here these few days." Yu nodded her head. "Then I will go and pick up the branches first." Lin Yang said, then went around to pick up the branches, then carried them back to the cave. Yu cut off a leg of meat, then using a rack, she placed it on the fire to roast. Her movements were skillful and natural, making Lin Yang somewhat inconceivably opened his eyes wide. "Do you often roast meat? You seem to be very skillful." He looked at her and asked. "It took me a long time to learn it. My master said that I have to learn how to survive outside, so not only can I roast meat, even if I don't have a fire starter, I can drill wood to make a fire," she said with a smile, adding branches to the fire. "You're really amazing. You're clearly younger than me," he said in a daze. "My big senior brother and second senior brother are even more powerful." She raised her head and said proudly. When she was outside, she remembered her master's words and addressed her elder brother and brother as eldest senior brother and second senior brother. "Who is your master? Where do you live? Where are you going after we leave this place?" Lin Yang asked. "After leaving this place, I will naturally return to the mountain. As for who my master is, Master said that I can't use his name to show off." She stuck out her tongue and said with a smile, "So, I can't say it, I can't say it." Hearing this, Lin Yang hugged his knees and rested his chin on them. He looked at the bonfire and said softly, "After I leave this forest, I will go find my grandfather. Once I find him, I will be safe." Chapter 47:19. Hearing this, Lin Yang was startled, and somewhat uncertainly said, It shouldn't be, right?" Yu seriously thought for a bit, then said, "Unless the person who wants to kill you doesn't know where your grandfather is, otherwise knowing that you are going to look for your grandfather, he will definitely intercept and kill you on the way." For a moment, Lin Yang didn't speak, only looking at her in a daze. He asked, "Why do you think that the person who wants to kill me will intercept and kill me on the way to my grandfather?" Obviously you are so small, how can you think of that? Because my mother taught me. My mother said, when encountering a matter, I must use my brain more. If I don't use my brain, sometimes I won't even know how I died. Thinking of her mother, a joyful smile appeared on her small face. My mother is a very, very powerful person. She taught me a lot of things. Although I haven't learned them all, my mother said that I'm very smart. In the future, I'll slowly learn them by myself. Lin Yang remained silent, don't know what he was thinking. He didn't speak again, only staring at the bonfire in a daze. Next, you used 3 days to gather 100 crystallic nucleus. After gathering 100 crystallic nucleus, she couldn't help but take out her communication jade to send a message to her 2 brothers, telling them that she had already gathered 100 crystallic nucleus, and was preparing to leave this place. This day, Yu took Lin Yang to walk out of the forest, and when they passed by water source, she shouted for Lin Yang to guard at one side, while she went to change her clothes and wash her face. At the side of that small spring of water source, she changed her clothes and wore a pink-colored small skirt. After wiping her body, she washed her hair, then drying her hair, she tied her hair into 2 braids. Lin Yang, I have changed, you also go and change your clothes. Yu shouted, and with light footsteps, she walked out with all smiles. Lin Yang turned his head to take a look, and saw that after washing her entire body was refreshed, moreover her appearance was also very good-looking, especially when she wore that pink-colored small skirt, she appeared even more lovable and cute, and didn't have the slightest bit of fierceness when she killed ferocious beasts. I don't have any clothes, only this set on my body. He lowered his head and looked at his dirty and messy clothes, then somewhat uncomfortably pulled the corner of his clothes. I didn't ask you to wear your clothes. Yu slyly smiled, then taking out a set of her clothes from her space, she said, my mother prepared a lot of clothes for me every year, you wear mine. That's a skirt, I am a boy, how can I wear it? He shook his head, and hurriedly waved his hand. You don't want to live? Yu looked at him, and seriously said, if you go out wearing your clothes, then you will certainly be killed before you can find your grandfather. But if you dress up as a girl, then that is not the case. Those people who want to kill you will only look for a little boy, and not a little girl. What? He looked at her in a daze. He didn't expect her to give him such an idea. To wear. Until to the end, to your to t, to teat, until to find your to your to find. Chapter 47:20. After a while, Lin Yang, who had changed into a girl's clothing somewhat embarrassedly, walked out. While walking, he pulled his skirt, and his little face was slightly red with a shy appearance. You look very good wearing women's clothing. Yu's eyes lit up, and beaming with smiles, she looked at him. But I feel strange. He pulled his skirt, and again looked at this beautiful sky blue colored dress, and his heart had an indescribable feeling. No, it's very good, I'll help you tie your hair. Yu walked towards him with a smile, and took out a ribbon of the same color to tie his hair. Because she was helping others to tie his hair, she didn't braid his hair, rather let his hair hang loose, covering half of his face, making his appearance more and more like a girl. Yu took him along a small path, and the 2 people used more than half a day to get out of this forest. When they arrived at the mountain path outside, Yu looked all around, and seeing that there was no one around, she said to him, let's quickly go. Let's see if we can find a place to stay before dark. Okay. Lin Yang just responded, and saw her speed suddenly increased, which startled him so much that he hastily lifted his skirt and chased after her. At the same time, Hao and Mu Chen, who were inside the forest, received Yu's message. Both of them couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment, then revealed a smile. They didn't expect that among the 3 people, the fastest one was unexpectedly their younger sister. They also didn't know what method she used to actually gather all the crystallic nucleus so quickly. Thinking that she had already come out of the forest, they also began to count their achievements these days. Mu Qin counted, and saw that he still lacked 13 crystallic nucleus to reach 100 crystallic nucleus. Seeing that the sky was still not dark, he put away the crystallic nucleus and walked towards the forest, intending to see if he could hunt a few more beasts before dark, and then hunt some more tomorrow. It would be best if he could leave here the day after tomorrow. However, was much worse, because he had 300 crystallic nucleus. Even if he worked very hard these days, but now he still lacked 60 to 70 crystallic nucleus. Similarly, seeing that the sky was still not dark, he also went to the forest to continue hunting ferocious beasts. He even calculated in his heart that he could try to hunt some beasts that came out to hunt at night. The level of ferocious beasts in the area he was in was relatively high, and the majority of them could be seen everywhere were sacred beasts. These days, the number of beasts in this large area had become less and less. He thought that after hunting today, he would have to change location tomorrow. What he didn't know was that a group of disciples who were here to gain experience, under the guidance of their sect's elders. But when they walked through the forest, they were somewhat astonished. Strange, how come the beasts in this area? Moreover, there seems to be traces of battle. A middle-aged man leading the team said. He looked at the elder beside him and said, "Third elder, do we need to go somewhere else? Let's walk a bit more, perhaps some clan had come here to gain experience." That elder said, and his footsteps paused, because he heard the faint roar of beasts coming from the forest. "There are roars of beasts, should we go and take a look?" The middle-aged man asked. Chapter 47:21. Yes. The two young disciples responded and walked forward. "Rest here," the elder said to the others. The two young disciples searched for the source of the sound. Before they even got close, they felt a surge of air. They glanced at each other and used the trees as cover to look ahead. When they saw it, they couldn't help but be shocked. The two of them didn't even bother to hide. They even forgot about the elder's orders and jumped out, crying out at the same time. "Be careful." How, who was about to make a move, glanced in the direction of the sound and frowned. Seeing the ferocious beast at the peak of the holy beast realm pouncing towards him, he turned the dagger in his hand and moved his feet, immediately attacking. His speed was extremely fast, and the place where the dagger had pierced was precisely the holy beast's fatal point. Relying on his exquisite movement and strange skills, he had struck the holy beast in one strike. A miserable roar resounded, and it shook the entire forest. "Oh no! This is the peak of the holy beast. The two of them are in danger." The elder felt the fluctuation of the pressure and was worried that their disciple had angered the ferocious beast. He immediately rushed towards the source of the sound. Those who could enter their sect were all disciples of century-old families. This time, they brought them out to gain experience, so that they would not have to stay in the sect all the time. However, the premise of going out to gain experience was that they had to ensure the safety of their disciples. If something happened, there would be trouble. After all, the family behind each disciple was not to be trifled with. When they arrived at the source of the sound, they saw two of their disciples standing at the side. In front of them, a powerful vicious beast was twitching on the ground, dying. Beside the vicious beast, a little boy in tight clothes was stabbing the vicious beast with a dagger. After the vicious beast died, he skillfully dug out the crystal core and the vicious beast's nidan. When the elder and the middle-aged man saw this scene, they were stunned for a moment. They didn't recover from their shock. After a long while, when they saw the little boy put away the items, the elder looked at the two young disciples and asked, "What's going on here? Are you okay?" We're fine." The two of them recovered and said, but their surprised eyes were still staring at the little boy. "Elder, there's no one else around. There's only this child." The middle-aged man whispered. He released his divine sense to scan the surroundings and found that other than them, there was only this child. There didn't seem to be any adults around the child. Hearing this, the elder took a deep breath and walked forward. He asked, "Child, who are you? Why are you here?" How looked at the horns on the ferocious beast's head and was about to use a dagger to cut off its horns and sell them in the city. When he heard the old man's voice, he glanced at him, then glanced at the people around him and behind him. He frowned and said with a cold expression, "Stay away from me." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They didn't expect this child to say such a thing. Chapter 47:22. Hao had a cold personality, and he didn't have a good impression of the people from the Heavenly Sun sect. He said, "I don't want to know who you are, and I don't want to know you. Stay away from me and don't get in my way." The young disciples were displeased by the words of a child. They were all sons of aristocratic families and the pride of their sections. How could they tolerate a child being so arrogant? Just as they were about to scold him, their elder spoke up. Everyone swallowed their words. "Hee, child, did you kill this beast?" The elder asked with a chuckle. His gaze landed on the fatal wound on the ferocious beast and asked, "May I know who your master is?" There are many relationships between sects and aristocratic families. Perhaps this old man and your master are old friends. Hao didn't pay any attention to that. Old friends with his master. Was that what he meant? What a joke. What kind of person was his master? He was someone that even the mighty figures of the upper immortal world had to bow and greet with a smile. How could he be old friends with an elder from a sect? Moreover, they weren't even on the same level. However, if he mentioned his master's name, these people would have heard of his name even if they hadn't seen him before. However, his master also said that he shouldn't use his name to scare people outside unless it was absolutely necessary. Hao thought to himself as he cut off the beast's horns with his dagger. There were very few beasts that were at the peak of the holy beast realm that he had hunted these days. Moreover, apart from the 2 horns, this beast's skin should be worth a lot of money as well. However, skinning it was too troublesome. After cutting off the 2 horns, he cut off one of the beast's hind legs and prepared to roast it. After throwing everything into the space, he didn't even look at those people and walked away. This kid is too arrogant. He's a little too condescending. A disciple said. He's got guts too. He actually dares to walk around here alone. Moreover, he looks very skilled at cutting. It's as if he's done it more than 100 times. Another disciple said thoughtfully. This child looks about 11 years old. Why is he here alone? His parents are really not worried. Aren't they afraid that he'll be in danger? A young girl looked in the direction that the child left with unconcealable worry on her delicate face. At this time, the 2 young disciples who were standing at the side first took a deep breath and said, "You don't know, but this child's speed is extremely fast. Just now, we thought that he would be bitten to death by that fierce beast, but we didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, that fierce beast would fall down. That is a fierce beast at the peak of the holy beast level, and its combat strength is very shocking. However, we didn't see how that child attacked, we only know that when we came back to our senses, he had already stabbed that fierce beast's fatal spot." Hearing this, everyone fell silent. Although they didn't see it with their own eyes, they did see the child skillfully cutting and digging out the crystal core and inner core. That technique didn't look like a novice at all. Instead, he looked like a veteran. Could he be an expert who has regained his youth? A disciple couldn't help but guess. Chapter 47:23. Elder, should we follow him? A disciple asked. The elder regained his senses, glanced at him, and asked, "Why should we follow him?" The disciple's face turned red at the question. He opened his mouth but did not dare to speak. "Elder, this ferocious beast meat." The middle-aged man looked at him with an expectant smile. "It's fresh. It's a ferocious beast at the peak of the holy beast level. Let the disciples carry it and prepare it for dinner." As the elder spoke, he looked in the direction the child left and sighed softly, "What an outstanding child. I wonder whose disciple he is." With the elder's words, the disciples picked up the ferocious beast and carried it away. They found a place to roast it and eat it. On the other side, saw that the sky was not dark yet, so he searched for a while. In the end, he killed 3 first-level holy beasts before returning to the cave to rest. He roasted the ferocious beast meat in the cave and rested for a while. Seeing that the sky had darkened, he vaguely heard 1 or 2 beasts roaring outside. He got up and walked out. Although it was best to hunt during the day because of the line of sight, it was more advantageous for him to hunt. However, he also had to learn to adapt to the darkness and learn how to hunt in the dark. Therefore, he wanted to come out and give it a try. As for this area, he was very clear that there should be some first-level and second-level holy beasts. Relatively speaking, the danger was greatly reduced. Not far from the people from the sect were resting when they suddenly heard movement in the forest. They were so shocked that they stood up abruptly. "It can't be. Who's not resting at night and actually came out to hunt? It can't be that child from the day, right?" A disciple muttered with his eyes wide open. "Other than us, there's only him in this area. We don't have to guess to know it's him." Another young man said and sighed softly, "Comparisons are odious. We're all humans, so why is that child so much stronger than us? His courage is really not for show. He dares to come in here alone. If it were me, I wouldn't dare even if you beat me to death. Listen, listen. It's another ferocious beast's scream. TSK, this child is incredible." Another young man clicked his tongue in wonder as he listened to the ferocious beast's scream echoing in the night. He was very curious about the child. "All right, let's all go and rest." The middle-aged man scolded and walked around with his hands behind his back. He resisted the urge to take a look and sat down beside the elder. They spent the entire night in the midst of the faint roars of beasts. Surprisingly, other than the movements on that side, there was no movement on their side at all. Originally, they were worried that the smell of blood at night would attract other fierce beasts. However, they guarded against it until dawn and did not see a single fierce beast attacking them. At daybreak, Hauer had already gone to another area. There were no more beasts in this area. Even if there were some fish that escaped the net, they were scared away and didn't dare to stay in this area. He couldn't catch anything here anymore, so he could only change places. When the people of the Sky Sun sect woke up the next day, they inexplicably felt that the forest in this area had become even quieter. They couldn't even hear a single beast roar. This feeling made them feel inexplicably strange. Chapter 47-24. Hearing these words, many people's expression slightly changed, and one of them said, "It shouldn't be, this place is so big, how could a child hunt all the ferocious beasts in this area? It's impossible." Then, they continued to walk forward, and even spread out all around to search. They also released their divine sense, and the final result was, in this area, there really wasn't even a single ferocious beast. Truly a little abnormal, he actually really killed all the ferocious beasts in this area. The middle-aged man leading the group couldn't help but said, then looking towards the elder, he asked, "How about we go to the north side to look?" The elder pondered for a long time, then said, "We can only do this, let's go." So, everyone walked towards the north side. Next day evening, after Hauer saw that his crystallic nucleus was enough, he also tidied up a bit, and after sending a message to his elder brother, he also left the forest by himself. And at this time, on the other side, Yu and Lin Yang also arrived at a small town. Looking at Lin Yang who was gasping for breath, Yu said while beaming with smiles, you have to practice more, you can't run as fast as me. If someone wants to kill you, you won't be able to escape with this kind of speed. Lin Yang gasped for breath, then raised his sleeve to wipe his sweat. Because he was constantly rushing all the way, moreover he was chasing her from behind, so walking was even more tiring. It's because your speed is too fast. His speed was already considered as fast among his peers, but compared to her, he was instantly turned into dregs. But after getting along with her for these few days, he also knew that not only her speed was fast, her skill was also astonishing, so he basically couldn't treat her as an ordinary child. Let's go and eat something first. The sky is also getting dark, today we will find a place to rest, and tomorrow we can also go separately. She said while beaming with smiles, I want to be the first one to return to the mountain, the first one to return will have a reward. Lin Yang followed her towards the small town, and after they found a place to eat something, they went to the inn to rest. Next morning, while Yu was eating steaming hot meat buns, she saw Lin Yang walking over. Yunqi, I have to go, will we meet again in the future? Lin Yang looked at her, his little face had reluctance to part. Yu shook her head and said, I don't know, but I feel that there shouldn't be much chance to meet, because my master usually doesn't let us go down the mountain. As she spoke, she ate the bun and chewed like a little squirrel. She looked at him and asked, do you want to eat a bun? I'll treat you to it, or you can eat it on the way. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked around and called the waiter over. She had him fill up 2 steamers with buns and give them to him. Take them. You have to live well. Don't die. Remember what I told you. Lin Yang lowered his head and looked at the bag of buns that she stuffed over, his eyes slightly red, and, I will definitely live, I will not forget what you said. He sniffed and said, then I will go, take care of yourself. All right. Yu seemed as if she was heartless and didn't have the slightest bit of feeling of reluctance to part. As before, she was all smiles while looking at him. Chapter 47-25. Early in the morning, she had asked the waiter, and had also inquired about the route. Calculating her walking distance, if there was no delay or any accident, then she would be able to walk back to Cloud Sky Mountain in 10 days. She was actually not worried about Lin Yang, because she had told him to go to the town to hire some loose cultivators or mercenaries to protect him on the way. This way, he would naturally be a lot safer. Humming a small tune, she walked around the small town with brisk steps. She bought some food and put it in her space, and also bought some seeds. Only when it was close to noon, did she leave the small town and go towards the mountain path. Little girl, where did you come from? Why are you the only one here? Where are your father and mother? Seeing this little girl, several loose cultivators who were leisurely riding their contracted beasts on the mountain path couldn't help but be flabbergasted. Yu raised her head and looked at them, then revealing a pure and harmless smile, she mysteriously said, I am not alone. Hearing these words, several loose cultivators were startled, then looking at each other, they looked towards the surroundings. Merely, they thought that there were shadow guards following them in the dark, however they discovered that there was nothing. Looking at this little girl again, she had already taken out a fruit and was eating it while walking. Little girl, where are you going? Come up. We will send you off. One loose cultivator said with a smile, then bending over, he extended his hand towards her. No need, I will walk back by myself. Yu said while eating the fruit, then shaking her head, she walked her own path. Hearing this, that loose cultivator laughed in a clear voice, You, a little girl, how far can you walk? Besides, this small town is divided into 3 paths, and only by walking on each path can you reach the next small town. You can't walk. Yu quickly finished the fruit, then taking out her small handkerchief, she carefully wiped her mouth. Only then did she put away the handkerchief, then with a beaming smile, she said to those few people, I'm leaving, goodbye uncles. Finished speaking, she waved her small hand towards those few people, and the next moment, the aura of spiritual power on her body rose, and her footsteps also followed. Almost in a blink of an eye, her figure had already moved 100 meters away. Those few loose cultivators who were riding their contracted beasts were startled, and were somewhat astonished. This little girl hid her strength deeply. Ah! What an interesting little girl, let's go. Chase after him and ask him which family he is from. A man laughed heartily as he looked at the small figure in front of him that was getting further and further away with great interest. He called out to his mount and quickly gave chase. Ha ha ha. That's right. Let's go. Let's go check it out. Several loose cultivators laughed and they hastily rode their mounts to catch up. They were originally idle people, traveling everywhere without any restrictions. The difference was that they were not the kind of itinerant cultivators who had no clan to call home. Instead, they were itinerant cultivators who came from their clans to travel and gain experience. Naturally, they did not have to worry about cultivation resources and could do as they pleased. Yu used the footwork taught by her mother to walk, so her speed was naturally fast. After walking for a while, she again changed to the footwork taught by her master. Her feet practically didn't step on the ground, only occasionally using the tip of her foot to borrow strength. Her speed was fast and effortless. She thought that the reason why Master wanted them to walk back by themselves was probably because he wanted them to practice their footwork. Chapter 47-26. Hey, little girl, wait for us. A rogue cultivator waved his hand towards her and said with a smile, this road is also not short, let's chat. Little girl, where did you come from? Your footwork is very exquisite, I wonder who your master is. Another rogue cultivator asked in amazement. His gaze was fixed on her changing footwork, and he unexpectedly discovered that this little girl's speed was too fast, and he was unable to see through how her footwork changed. This little girl is not simple. Ah. The few of us almost misjudged you. Tell us about it. Who is your master? What's the name of your footwork? Yu looked at them with a smile, and her expression had a trace of craftiness as she said, I'm not telling you. While speaking, her speed increased by a lot, and in the blink of an eye, she pulled a large distance away from them. Moreover, she turned her head and made a face at them, which made them stare blankly for a moment, and like a wisp of smoke, she swept forward. Her speed was so fast that it was almost comparable to flying on a sword. TSK, this footwork is really exquisite, I don't even dare to guarantee that if we compete in footwork, whether we can catch up with her or not. A rogue cultivator said, and a trace of light flashed through his eyes, and a smile appeared on his lips, I really want to see where this little girl came from. Who is her master? She's so powerful at such a young age. As soon as his voice fell, he raised his chi, and at the same time, with a flick of his sleeve, he recalled his mount into the space, and then quickly chased after the little figure in front of him. It seems that Shinshichi is serious. Never mind, since we have nothing to do, let's also join in the fun and see. Another person said with a smile, and also recalled his contracted beast, and then raised his chi and chased after the little girl. In terms of footwork, they naturally weren't as exquisite as that little girl, but their cultivation was higher than her, and in terms of speed, they still had the upper hand. Not long after, several people caught up with the little girl's footsteps, but didn't overtake her, and just followed beside her, carefully sizing her up. After sizing her up, a trace of surprise flashed through their eyes. Previously, they didn't pay much attention to her, and only knew that this little girl's appearance was delicate and pretty, but now that they carefully sized her up, they discovered that her appearance had been tampered with. Someone should have used a technique to cover her original appearance, and now this delicate and pretty little face might not be her real appearance. Several people were surprised in their hearts. It seemed that this little girl had some background, and was also very mysterious. One must know that ordinary people wouldn't use a secret technique to cover their appearance, and moreover, the strength of the person who used this technique was also not simple, so ordinary people really couldn't see through her appearance, and this appearance wasn't her original appearance. Being caught up by several people, Yu's little face couldn't help wrinkling, and somewhat powerlessly and somewhat helplessly glared at them. Their strength was far stronger than her, so their speed definitely wouldn't be slower than her, but, did these people have nothing to do after eating their fill? Why did they keep following her? Little girl, come and talk ah. Ha ha ha, little girl, what's your name? Heh heh, you all take a look, this little girl has a bitter little face, and a helpless look, how interesting is that? Another person grinned, and looking at that tender little face, he had a kind of impulse to stretch out his hand and poke it. Chapter 47:27. Why aren't you walking? Are you tired and want to rest? One of the men said with a smile and also stopped. Why are you all following me? Yu frowned and said. Then she walked to the grass on the roadside and sat down. Then she took out a steamed bun from her space and ate it. Since she consumed a lot of spiritual power, it was easy for her to get hungry, especially when she was still so small. Seeing her eating steamed bun, several people couldn't help but smile. Then they said, we are idol cultivators. Usually we travel all over the place and also don't have anything to do. But since we met you, such an interesting little girl, we decided to travel together with you. So that you won't be bored all the way. Hearing this, Yu continued eating steamed bun and didn't answer. She only looked at them with her pair of beautiful big eyes. Little girl, what is your name? It shouldn't be a problem for you to tell us, right? One of them asked with a smile. After Yu swallowed the steamed bun, she slowly said, originally, it doesn't matter if I tell you my name, but you all don't look like good people. My mother said that when we are outside, if people we don't know ask for our name, we can't tell them. Hearing this, several people were startled for a moment. Then they looked at each other with strange expression. Do we look like bad people? Bad people don't write their name on their face. Yu continued to speak. Then she glanced at them and said, moreover, you all have been following me. It is very suspicious. You all shouldn't be kidnapping and selling children, right? While speaking, her small face also showed a touch of fear. Ha 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 ha, you little girl are really interesting. That man called Shinshichi raised his head and laughed. He looked very happy and said with interest, you don't need to worry, we are really not bad people. My surname is Shen, and I am the 17th child in my family. So my friends outside all call me Shinshichi. Little girl, what about you? Shichi. Yu blinked her eyes and said, I used to have a bodyguard. He was also called Shichi. Oh. It seems we are quite fated. He laughed. Then looking at her, he continued to ask, then what about you? What is your name? It shouldn't be a problem for you to tell us your name, right? Yu stared at them. Finally, after thinking for a bit, she said, my name is Yunqi. My master named me Yunqi. Ha ha ha, you see what I said? Didn't I say we were fated? I'm 17 and you're little 7. He chuckled and looked at her. With a friendly and familiar look, he continued to ask, little 7, what is your master's name? Yu glanced at him, then stuffing a steamed bun into her mouth, she shook her head and said, my master's name can't be casually spoken, it will scare people to death. Want to inquire about her master's name? She wasn't going to tell them. When they heard this, they looked at each other and laughed. One of them said, it's okay. We're very brave. We won't be scared easily. Who knows, we might even know your master. Yu continued to eat steamed buns, and after eating several in a row, seeing there were still few left, she put them away, then standing up, she looked at them and said with a beaming smile, I am not a 3-year-old child, I said I won't tell you, so I won't tell you. Even if you coax me, it's useless." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure flashed a few meters away. She made a face at them with a sly smile on her small face. "I'm leaving. You guys can rest here for a while. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.